Sadly, this is a forsaken generation. Hear this well, we're not going away. Eyes are opening to the truth. We grow stronger in number as a united force every day. Babies are dying, parents left crying, told that SIDS or coincidence disorder are to blame, parents forced to live with the pain and shame. The once bright smiling faces full of wonder turned vacant stares, families shattered while they also endured the public glares. You're wiping out future generations for your own selfish gain as we form this revolution for liberation and change. We will keep speaking louder and louder. We will not be silenced until there's a shift in power. So stand up, speak out, be brave, be the voice of the voiceless. Too many forsaken lay in their graves. Welcome to Forsaken Generation.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Forsaken Generation indeed. Today, it is going to be a show like none other, and my nerves are probably more up than they have ever been in my life, and I am so shaky that I can't pick up my coffee for fear I will burn myself. So, welcome to the show, Anu. Can you hear me, my friend?
How you doing, Lynette?
Yeah, I'm all right. Holding down the throw up.
Yeah, you know what? It's going to be fine. Here's the thing. The way I see it is you're the one that, set this interview up. You set this show up. You are the one who's having these, you're the one that's having the correspondence with Dr. Paul Offit. This is a conversation between you and him, okay? And everybody else and all the situations, and everything about this community and all this stuff that is bringing the nervousness upon you is besides the point. I mean, I honestly feel like everybody else that's been talking to you about this has been making this more of a stressful thing for you than it needs to be. I think,
that's pretty true. I'm kind of calm about it. Even, I just got to do the breathing. My daughter was laughing. I was sitting here saying, "Woosa."
Yeah, it's you, and it's someone that you've already been talking to. So, and that's the biggest thing. To get a little bit off topic here, but what I think might be important to say at this point is that, the last few months I've really been thinking about what we do, is just people for ourselves, in our lives, whatever. I've been thinking a lot about those kind of things, and I've been thinking about what we don't do or what we're nervous to do purely because of what other people say, think, or feel. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and we stress out so much about something that's going on in our lives that we purely have control over, and even if we don't, it's our life. But so much of what we say and do is predicated upon how other people think about your situation. And I just think that's kind of and I did it for a long time in my life, and I still do it to a certain extent here and there. But I've been spending time trying to delete those things, not even try to deal with them, literally delete them, because from what I've realized is that nobody else is living my life. Even if they're living a version of it, they're living their lives, I'm living mine, and I'm going to stop listening to other people tell me how to live mine. And that goes for things like this, too. Like, you're the one that, like I said before, you're the one that got the interview, you're the one that set up the show, you're the one that's been corresponding with Dr. Paul Offit, so who cares what these other people think? Really, who cares?
Yeah. Well, and I've been preparing, and I know, I told you last week it was hard when I was getting messages from people saying I wasn't a worthy adversary and these kind of things. And you know what? Credential-wise, I beg everyone to please look at his credential list, and then you go out and you find the person on our side who's got a list that matches on the opposite side. Because good luck with that. Honestly, if they want a worthy adversary, then I just say good luck with that, because the people were throwing, like Del Bigtree or JB or a lot of those people out there, neither of those guys have, even close to that, like when it comes to like what our side would be. You know what I mean? Even some of the positions on our side, I don't think their list of credentials even come close. And I'm not saying his credentials or anything, but he did that. You know what I mean? Same if, any of our doctors on our side, all the things that they've done. And so, for me, honestly, I'm just excited about this opportunity. And, I don't know. It's one of those things, like I was reading in his book. He actually sent me a copy of his book, Bad Advice. And so one of the things in his book says, when the science is settled, he's talking about agreeing to have conversations with people on our side. And he said, why do that when the science is settled? And he says, when you agree to do that, you are agreeing at least tacitly that the issue is debatable. And then on the following page it says, so my recommendation is to avoid these situations. But he does finish that paragraph off saying that he thinks this advice might be wrong. So, I don't know. I know that for me, this is an opportunity, and this is not the grand debate. This is something, we've been talking about. I have questions, of course, about things on this topic, of course. I have lots of questions from listeners, from new listeners, from people who are just a part of this truth movement. But, I also have, just regular life questions. Everybody who's come on, this show has had an opportunity to talk about who they are and how they got where they are and why they do what they do. And, I'm just as curious about his story as I am anybody else's because, how often do you even get to know these people? How often do you even get to see from the other side of the table? It's just it's a very interesting day today. And, it's good to talk to you. I knew you'd calm my nerves, and I didn't even take 2 minutes of talking to you before I felt amazing again. So thank you for always keeping me on the level, my friend.
You're welcome on that anytime. I think about it. I think it's an even more basic, like elemental type issue, right? The very fact that people are mentioning the word adversary is the problem, right? Like like saying you're not a worthy adversary is saying multiple things. First of all, they don't think that you're up to the task, whatever the task is. Secondly, they're saying that this is an adversarial type of like contentious type situation, which it doesn't have to be, And then third, they're saying that this is the way we should be doing this. It's like all of that is wrong, okay? Like, and number one is that if you come into a situation ready for a fight, right? Like preparing for a fight.
Yeah.
Then that's what it's going to be, right? It's okay to be ready for a possibility of a fight, right? But preparing to fight right off the offset is the wrong thing to. It's the wrong way to approach an issue or any scenario. Nothing good comes out of that. And for those that think, well, Anu, what do you know about that? Hey, listen, you guys have no idea where I come from. When I was a young guy, I was a very angry young man, and I approached every situation like it was like that, and quite a few times it got me into trouble. You know what I mean? Like any young man, who thinks he's the top of the food chain and the top of the totem pole and the big dog in the yard or whatever. You know what I mean? If you've been through that, you realize, holy cow! If I approach every situation with my chest puffed, that's not going to go well. So right off the bat, I'd say, if someone comes up to me and says, you're not a worthy adversary, all of those words are like, well, you obviously don't get the situation. And then it's disregarded. So people can say whatever they want. And, I've read some of the, the proposed questions that people think you should ask. And I don't know and I don't want to be mean, but I don't know if any of these people have really spent time understanding the syntax and semantics that they use in conversation and really analyze what the connotations of what they say are. You know what I mean? Like what the connotations and the general feeling they give off by the words they say. They may think they're being really clever, by wording questions the way they
right.
do, but I don't think they see how confrontational their language is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been saying since he agreed to do this months ago, on my page, on our radio show page, anywhere that I've spoken about this interview, I have said to everyone, if you don't keep it drama-free or respectful or in a way that I can ask the question without feeling like I'm going to cause some kind of drama, then it won't be asked. And so, everybody's been forewarned. And I will fit in as much of the respectful stuff as I can, of course. And there were some questions that were brought up that were amazing. And, there were some that were kind of like things I would never ask.
Right.
But, I think everybody's in a different place. You got some people who are still just seething and angry, and you've got some people who understand what I'm trying to do here. And so, everybody's coming from a different place in their journey of healing, and I completely understand that. I mean, I was angry at one point. We've spoken about it. If anybody deserves to be angry, rotavirus vaccine, caused my daughter intussusception twice,
right.
But at some point you have to go, okay, there's a bigger picture here, and I don't think by yelling at these people or getting in their faces we're doing any good. I don't think by making fun of them we're doing any good. And if they, if that's what they were doing to our side, and some of them are, but you know what I'm saying. If that's the way that it is, we look at those people who are on their side of this and we think, wow, how immature. Like, how silly are they? And then our side does those things, and it's like, wow, how immature, how silly are they? And, it just
right.
makes me sad because it doesn't have to be that way. And, people just, I don't know. I just really hope that people start seeing that and understanding that the only way to actually get to where we actually cause some sort of change to come would be to have conversations and not to be, so spit in your face kind of mentality. Yeah, I'm sure it feels good for a minute, but it just doesn't get us anywhere in the long run.
I think people have watched too many reality TV shows, so too much Jersey Shore, too much of that stuff. I honestly believe that they've watched way too much of that stuff, and they think that that's how human beings should interact with each other on a normal basis. I would have to say that just in general interactions with human beings, and the way people talk to each other, I've noticed a pretty significant change from what I remember growing up and expecting. I think just the way people talk to each other now, people are more into picking a fight than they are trying to find an answer or solve an issue or come to a consensus or any kind of amicable kind of situation. I think people think, I think maybe it's subconscious. They're like, okay, this person disagrees with what I think. All right, time to start attacking them. You know what I mean? Like I just look at the way people are interacting on social media. And if people think it stays there, it doesn't. I see the way people act with each other, and it's interesting. I see it all the time. People would just disagree on a very basic thing, and then you'll see the other person just jump down their throat without even being like, well, why do you think that way? And then sit there and listen to why that person, it's like they're ready to jump down their throat and, just disregard anything and negate everything the other person says just because they disagree with them. And it's an interesting phenomenon because I don't remember it being that way growing up. It's just gotten so much worse.
Yeah. It seems like everything's changed quite a bit since we were kids. I mean, just looking around at the way people treat each other, the mentality of I remember when I was a kid, people were just so much more friendly. And if you had an issue or if you were broke down on the side of the road or if you were in the grocery line and you were a few pennies short, whatever it was, people cared and people helped strangers. And nowadays, if you see something like that, everybody's got to break out their video cameras. Everybody's got to video it. Everybody's got to share it 3 million times because it's such a rare act that, and it's like, why is this so rare that it's literally become something we must capture to prove it happens still? This should be every day. This should be the way people are treating each other. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I really do think it's interesting the way people interact with each other nowadays. It's kind of worrisome because the thing is, if people keep interacting with each other the way they do on social media, like nobody's going to get anything done. Everything is going to be a stalemate. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because people aren't willing to give at all, like even a little bit. They're not even willing to, venture into the, minute possibility or probability that what they think could be in one, multiverse or other, possibly wrong. They're just like, no. They just build this, they just build this, no pun intended, they build a wall around themselves, and they're like, no, you shall not, and I will not. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a weird thing. It's really weird. And then it's weird because, and I was just talking to a friend last night about this, is that now when you're the kind of person who's willing to be like, okay, you know what, I might be wrong about that, people think you're disingenuous. It's so rare that people think you're disingenuous if you're the kind of person that does that. Like, people literally think I'm lying when I say, no, you know what, I might be wrong about that. They feel like I'm being disingenuous. That's how rare it's become. And that's really worrisome. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, like if I was talking to Dr. Paul Offit, one of the things that I'm most interested in asking someone like him is, what do you think about what's going on with, scientific journals, and that a lot of scientists are now coming out saying things like, we can't even do the science we want to do because the scientific journals aren't publishing those things, so we can't get the funding for the science that we want to do. Never mind vaccines, never mind all that stuff, just like regular old stuff, and that publishing companies, journals and stuff like that have basically turned scientific journal publishing into a nothing but for-profit business. And so real science hasn't even been done. And I would love to ask him that question because he's been involved with it quite a bit,
Yeah.
It would be interesting to ask him. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I would like to ask, like, every scientist that has to do scientific studies that question. And it'd be interesting to hear his point of view, considering he's been in a position where, specifically, like, for vaccines and stuff, he's been in the position where those kind of studies have gone through, and he's had to apply for those kind of things. Like, I've had that conversation with James Lyons Weiler. Dr. James Lyons Weiler, like, he has a very interesting kind of, a viewpoint on how scientific publishing and all these things work. And so does Dr. Brian Hooker. I mean, these are the questions we should be asking our scientists as well, is that, just not just about the vaccines, because it's like people think it's just the vaccines, right? But the thing is that the things that are wrong in the scientific community, institutions, and the legislation dealing with scientific discovery and, implementation is flawed. And it's not just affecting the vaccine world, it's affecting a lot of other stuff. Like, people don't think about this, but, like, what about, children's toys? Like, children's toys are being made with materials that, like, are we really testing them all? How is it that a product gets all the way into retail stores and then people are like, wait a minute, my kid's getting sick from using this toy. And then they study and then they do a huge recall. And then they find out there's lead in the paint of the toy. Like, how can it get all the way into a store, onto a shelf, before someone says anything? Obviously, there's something wrong in the system where that's happening. So I don't know. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I feel like people hone in on one subject and then they don't think about, how the problem is affecting all aspects of our life. And I think it'd be interesting to ask questions of people like Dr. Paul Offit and other scientists on quote, the opposition side. I hate using that word, but you know what I mean? About what they think about situations like that. And if they think whether or not those things affect, vaccine science.
Yeah, I'm interested in, I'm telling you, there's so many things I guess I've learned that I didn't realize. And I do think that a lot of the people who were on the I would say opposing side, it's interesting because a lot of yeah, I know, because and I mean, I don't like being called that, so I can get how other people wouldn't want to be called that either. But and that's one of the things, I don't know, it's just, I feel like if we all tried to do that a little bit more, thinking about how we want to be treated, then we would do a whole lot better off, treating other people that way and see how much further we get. But I mean, like, there's a lot of people who are on the opposing side who do seem to say things that go with our side as well. And even when they are, it would seem like they're talking smack. Some of them, I don't know, it's just interesting to me. I've seen a lot of books and a lot of things from the other side where they'll say, like, this is bad and this is bad, and I can understand how this could be bad, but then there's no way that vaccines could be bad. And I guess that it's so hard, especially, with people who have seen the science, to understand the disconnect, or to understand how, is there a disconnect, or is this blatant, or, you know what I'm saying? Because when I sit in the CDC for the ACID meetings, I really do feel like a lot of the stuff that is happening in the room feels very blatant. It feels like they know. I mean, because when there are certain things that are said that are something that, I don't know, it's like things that make, I feel like, normal human beings cringe, the whole room has like this unison chuckle instead, and it's like these creepy feelings. I don't know, it just makes you feel weird. It's like, how don't they see what's happening here? Because, I mean, so many people talk about credentials, or talk about, having a degree, or the letters beside your name and all these kind of things, and that if you don't have that, then, you don't know what you're talking about. But it's interesting to me because you sit in there and you see all these people with every bit of that, and they have no idea what they're talking about.
I mean, what I've, for a long time, I wondered if the things people were doing were active, like proactive, malicious intent sort of things. I really wondered. And obviously there are people out there that really do wish harm on other people and act on it. But I don't honestly think that that's the norm. Like, I really don't. The more I think about it, and the more I've interacted with, all kinds of people all over the world, and different kinds of people from all over the world, what I've realized is that, and I know you've heard me say this on this radio show before, is I honestly believe that most of it is compartmentalization of logic. People really, really compartmentalize their logic. And so, and that doesn't make people, I don't think that makes people stupid or any kind of derogatory term or anything like that. I honestly believe that, I go back to this a lot, but I honestly believe that our education system for the past, I would have to say, 2 to 3 generations has done us a great, great disservice in how we teach people to learn and critically think. And so that compartmentalization of logic is deep-rooted and deep-seated in all facets of our society. And so you get people that, on the one hand, are like, I want to save babies. I want to make everybody healthy. How do I do that? I figured out a magic potion that we can inject into everybody and give everybody, and everybody should drink, and everybody will be healthy all day. oh, wait, there's people getting hurt? That doesn't have anything to do with my magic potion. You know what I mean? Like, it's and the disconnect is like, oh, wait, you didn't consider the fact that there's a possibility. You just didn't consider the fact that the multi-ingredient thing that you created could have multivariant, like, symptomatic responses, because all you were looking at was fixing a specific problem. I mean, I see it all the time. I see it even in the work I do, right? I see it in the work that I do, and I'm like a problem-solving, tech-solving kind of guy, and there's many situations where something will be going wrong with the equipment because, if humans built it, something's going to go wrong. And something's going wrong, and I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to think of all the different things that could be causing it, right? And there's been situations where I've had, like, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I've had backseat drivers, right, in the situation. It's this. You should fix this. Try this. And then they fixate on one problem that they think, because that's the only thing they know, they fixate on that one problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
And then you fix that one thing, they're like, oh my God, are you sure you tried? And it's like, even when you show them, I changed the thing you told me to change, and the problem is not fixed, they keep going back to, well, did you do it right? It's like, like they keep going on the one thing. They get fixated on that one problem because that's the one thing that they've been thinking about. But the problem could be multiple other things. So I don't know. I mean, I really do think compartmentalization of logic is the biggest problem. And if we can get past that, maybe we can get somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think, it feels like a lot of people also we've talked about it so many times. If everybody just saw the bigger picture and worked together towards that, we would be doing a lot better. And I think everybody gets sidetracked. And while I love, it's good to have all the individual stuff, it really is, crucial that we all come together at some point. We've seen so many other countries literally have thousands in the streets over less than has happened in our own country. And, it just feels like it's so past time. We've got families out here who have been fighting 15, 20, some 30 or more years for, freedom and medical health choice and all these things that we are still fighting for now, and even in some states losing. And, it's sad to me because I don't know how, you hear some things and you see some things and you're curious how you're seen by the other side, and you're curious, I have a lot of questions I think that are interesting that are hopefully things other people want to hear the answer to as well. But, I think we've got a long way to go if we're going to really actually make this change happen. And I really do think that there are a lot of people who, I don't know, just think about it. There are so many people in this who can do so much if they just put away ego and put away personal gain and, those kind of things. I mean, everybody sees me out here. I am literally always, having in the struggle or whatever, because we don't get paid to be activists. You know what I mean? We're not out here making bank to do what we're doing. And it's quite the opposite. We're literally scraping by in order to try to do what we need to do to help things along. And I just hope that everybody out there realizes that until we start lifting each other up and we start treating each other with more respect and, those kind of things, I don't know how we're going to get any further anyway. I just hope that people really do remember history, and they think about how, yes, bad history has repeated itself, but good history can repeat itself too. Sometimes it just needs a little hand. And the civil rights movement, they did a lot for themselves by, we've talked about this. They took the hose, they took beatings, they stood there, they took it. I can't imagine our people taking a beating or taking a water hose or sitting there and holding their tongue. And you know what I'm saying? I can't imagine it. I mean, just through someone sending them a meme, they go insane. And I just wish that, you know what I'm saying, though. It's true.
No, I laughed and chuckled because I literally saw that happen like multiple times this week.
In your mind's eye, yeah.
Every week. And I just saw all those memes go through my head. I think people should, and I know people are going to get on me about this because I think there's a place for. And probably, maybe we should be having more of these type of conversations. We really should. Maybe we should be having more of the philosophical conversations than just purely based on data. And I'm not saying that data shouldn't be used. Data is extremely important. But we should also be, having conversations about what the philosophical, ramifications are of making certain choices. The other day I was, well, actually not just the other day. I the whole time I was on the bus tour, I don't know how many of you remember, but on the side of the bus, there was a slogan that said, where there's risk, there must be choice, right? And yeah. I'm one of those people that fixate on, expressions and stuff like that and really try to break it down and see what it means. You know what I mean? And for a long time, I was like, yeah, where there's risk, there's definitely should be choice. And I'm not trying to knock this, the expression at all, but I kept thinking about it over and over and over again. And one day I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. There should be a choice no matter what, right? Like,
yeah.
Why,
yeah.
Okay, obviously when there's risk, there should be choice, but there should be a choice no matter what.
Yeah.
Like if suddenly tomorrow people figured out that chocolate milk saved everyone's life, I still wouldn't be cool. Like I love chocolate milk. Don't get me wrong, right? I love chocolate milk. I'm drinking some right now. And there's some people I know that just don't like chocolate milk. If they don't want to drink chocolate milk, that's their friggin' choice. Whether it's going to save humanity or not, it should be their choice whether or not they drink chocolate milk. So. And whether, even if it was completely benign, even if there was no risk involved, someone should have the choice to say, you know what, I don't want to drink chocolate milk, bro. Like, and that person shouldn't be ridiculed. Be like, oh, you don't like chocolate milk? Cool, man. Do your thing. We're just saying this stuff's pretty good and it doesn't really hurt anything. It's completely benign, but it could save your life. And if they still say, nope, screw you, want to do it, or don't want to do it, then that's their choice. It really should be their choice. And the fact that, and it raises a larger question, something that I've talked about quite a few times before, which is that if people talk about, they have different names for it, right? Like there's the, they call it the net positive result. Like what is the net positive result? We should be looking at the net positive result, or what's for the greater good, and those kind of expressions, I think people throw them around a little too, irresponsibly. You know what I mean? Like I get it, but at what cost? You know what I'm saying? It really and what are we thinking about that cost? I made a video once where I asked, where I basically said that when I hear someone say something like for the greater good, what I really hear is the ends justify the means. You know what I mean? That's like what really goes on in my mind. That's the first thing that comes into my mind. And then once I hear the ends justify the means, I realize what it really means is acceptable collateral damage. You know what I mean? Like we're actually making a choice and saying the people that are going to get affected negatively by this thing that might save the majority of people, we're okay with those people being negatively affected. Like, that's what we're really saying. We're just saying it in a nicer way when we say for the greater good. For the greater good is essentially saying we're okay with those people getting hurt, a certain group of people getting hurt.
That is.
And I think if people,
that is what,
you know.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Lord Farquaad from Shrek. Some of you may die,
Yeah.
but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
It's
like,
totally
you know what?
Yeah.
It's sad. I mean, my daughter almost died, and
like that.
Yeah, and honestly, had she passed away, I don't know that they still would have listened to me. It really did. Like, even when I took her Lily in, it was a trip because they told me straight up. They were like, well, the one nurse called my phone and left a message and said, you were so smart to fight for her. You were so smart to try to get her in here. And, you know, just on. And it was like, you know, I was just glad somebody finally listened and treated me like I wasn't crazy for a minute, because we had been in and out of every ER around us. We had been over an hour out trying to get help, 26 days straight of fever for this child, and nobody wanted to help. And it was, you know, doing what happened to her. But then when I come back to you like, hey, this is what happened to her, all of a sudden, everybody's looking around the room, looking at the wall, looking at the ceiling. Nobody can look you in the eye anymore. Next thing you know, you're getting a phone call being told you can't bring your child here anymore. For anything else that they need, you need to go for the Center for Infectious Disease at Children's Hospital and let them deal with your kid. And I think, and this doctor straight up told me, I think the vaccines we gave her, I want to have to do this again. I want to be responsible. She needs to go and see them when she gets her next round. And so then in my head, I was like, next round, you know what I mean? It was like, that was scary for me. And I still didn't know enough about, I didn't know anything at that point. I just knew I watched her go from healthy to not healthy, and in a matter of a day. And it went from like, I'm jumping around wearing shirts that say I'd flex, but I'd rip my shirt from my muscles, to I can't lift my arms, Mommy. I can't. Being as white as a ghost, and it's just not even talking anymore, and having to literally rush her places. So, I mean, it's a scary thing to go through, and you get left on your own. I mean, I remember they just say Tylenol and Motrin every few hours, and, you know, if that doesn't work every 4 to 6, then give it to her every 2 to 4. And it's like, holy smokes, that seems like a lot of medicine. And then you find out that actually makes the injury worse. And it's just so sad because they're not telling you these things, and you think that they should know these things, and your best interest should be at heart. And, you know, I think that a lot of times it is sad because my doctor, you know, he tells me we know what we're told unless we go outside of it on our own. And that's why he is such an open-minded doctor, you know. And, you know, he told me he doesn't mind being proven wrong. And he said, matter of fact, he kind of thrives on it because it forces him to do better. And I love that, you know. I mean, he's definitely an older gentleman, and he keeps saying he won't retire yet because he said too many parents need him who should, you know, be able to go to pediatricians, should be able to go to these other doctors, but can't because they're more worried about a kickback than they are about health.
You know, it's a larger question too, right? Where maybe we should be asking. And I'm not, you know, stating one thing over the other, but, you know, maybe we should be asking more questions about, you know, what things should, like how we should deal with things like monetary incentives. You know what I mean? Like, on the one hand, I truly believe that that everybody deserves to have quality education, and by that I don't mean going to an educational institution that's you know what I'm saying. I think everybody should have that, and everybody should have health care, right? But does that mean that everybody should get it for free? Does that mean that the people that spent years learning how to do this stuff shouldn't be fairly compensated for their work? Does that mean that, you know, we start forcing doctors to, you know what I mean? Like, at what
Yeah.
what the degree of your right to those things, or your whatever, we should discuss those things. And I feel like a lot of people are taking a binary approach to it. It's in our country there's a possibility that people listen to us in other countries, but in the United States, the debate about universal health care versus not is a very fervent debate. And mind you, I come from a place that had universal health care, right? I come from a place that had that,
Yeah.
and I saw it working. And for most of my life, okay, I believed that is the way to do it. Now, whether or not that same sort of universal health care would work in the United States, I'm not so sure. Is there a version of it that could work? Possibly. But see, people hear terms like universal health care in our country, and the first thing they think is, well, then now the government's just going to force medication on us. And that's a possibility, right? That's a possibility. But to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater is an interesting thing that I've seen. For instance, like let's look at, things like the economy, okay? We live in a kind of a pseudo-capitalist free market country, right? But we have social programs, right? That
Yeah.
kind of come out of things like socialism and things like that. Now, you have this debate, and you mention those things in this country, and most people will either jump down your throat, or something of that degree. And I find it interesting because it's like, hey, listen. Like, there's been so many times where I would be like, whoa, calm down. I'm not saying we should be a socialist country. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, just because you mention certain things or the other, people certainly, like this whole thing. Put the napkin over your head because you don't want your flu shot, you're an anti-vaxxer. No, I'm not. I just don't want the flu shot, bro. Or, hey, man, I think everybody deserves to have a good education. Oh, you're just one of those socialist weirdos that wants to give everybody free shit. I was like, no, I didn't say that either. People are so ready to just toss you into a group, and it's like identity politics bullshit. And it's bullshit. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words. Identity politics is fucking bullshit, and everybody needs to chill the hell out because people are so ready to toss you into some category and then disregard you completely because you have one idea that might have a certain way of looking at it a little bit differently. There possibly is a way where a version of universal health care could work in this country. But try having that conversation with people in this country, and they'll start calling you a crazy communist socialist or something.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me that it's either all or nothing. You're either pro or anti, right. And it's either you're going to be vaccinated or you're going to die, and none of that's true. None of that's true. We know plenty of people that, especially, you've met tons of people around America who they're themselves or their children or both or whatever were not vaccinated at all throughout their entire lives, and they're healthier than the rest of the population. They're thriving. They're doing 10 times better than the rest of us are out here. And it's funny because when we see these children who are unvaccinated, in our minds we're going, oh my goodness, these children are so gifted, they're so talented, oh my goodness, they're so smart, and they're so much further than these other kids, and you're thinking they're gifted, they're talented or whatever, but then you realize this is what the average should be, and it's just not where we are anymore because of all the toxins, because of all the different ways, chemical assault is coming from so many different places. And it's really not just the vaccines. And you and I have talked about this many times. You've got it coming from your food, from your water, from the sky, it sounds crazy. It really does, but it's the truth. And, it's sad to see that, we need a lot more people out here talking about all of these things. And, I think that even uniting with people of, common goals here, is something that the medical health freedom movement needs to do, because all of these things are issues for health. And your freedoms are taken away when you don't even get the choice of whether or not the stuff is in your food. And I wonder, too, like you keep seeing a lot of these organic brands being exposed for, the ingredients being alive.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's so sad because you don't even know what you're getting still, and you're spending almost double the money most of the time to try to get a better option for your family, and who knows if if your money is being spent well worth. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The Z-Dog video where he talks about, and I might be referring to this term incorrectly, so correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But he was talking about how people have that some of these people that have been injured, blah blah blah, have had. It's called. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lynette. I really don't want to butcher this, but a mitochondrial enzymatic deficiency.
Mitochondrial.
Mitochondrial enzymatic deficiency. Okay, so I remember there was a scientist that came out, and there was a study that came out not too long ago, and I think we mentioned it on. I think Del mentioned it on the High Wire, where they found out that something up to anywhere from 35, 40% to 50% of children with autism. Actually, this would be a great question for Dr. Paul. Would be, they found out that 40 to 50% of these children with autism, with regressive isolated autism, they found out had that, mitochondrial enzymatic deficiency, and that there was a possibility that the vaccination exacerbated that issue and caused an injury. And so my question is, well, if that's the case, right? If that's the case, and we also know that there are definitely, the scientific community doesn't disagree on this thing, right? Not that consensus really matters, but this is a kind of a known fact that there are some people who literally cannot be vaccinated, right? They know this. Even the people that are for vaccinations know that there are some people who just cannot be vaccinated. What if we're just not screening people enough, and the number of people we think cannot get vaccinated is actually larger than what it than what it is right now? What if we just need to do a much better job of screening, and we find out, and there's a way where we can find out, wait, hold on a second, this child has a mitochondrial enzymatic deficiency, cannot get vaccinated. We find out that group is much larger than what we know now. Is there a possibility that we should maybe start doing that more, and we can avoid, all these injuries that are happening? What if we're just wrong about how many people cannot get vaccinated? Is that a possibility?
Well, my daughter became one of those people after vaccines. I had no idea she was somebody who shouldn't be. And, she became, hematologist, even oncology was involved at one point. She is never to receive another virus vaccine. A lot of virus vaccines still have other viruses in them that are not supposed to be in them, and so that technically she really didn't need to be vaccinated unless it was a dire emergency in the case of a huge outbreak of something that she, whatever. And they straight up, if she was to receive a live virus vaccine, it could kill her. With her condition after her 15-month injury, those 6 vaccines changed her whole body and how it ran and everything that it did. It literally just turned on itself. And I didn't know that was even possible. It wasn't like I was looking for it. It wasn't you know what I'm saying? I had no idea that your body could even do that. And so it was such a mind blow for me to even understand how it had happened. I remember talking to the hematologist and them telling me, her immune system was just couldn't handle it. That was too many at once, and her immune system couldn't take it, and it didn't know what to fight and who was an invader and who was a good guy, and it just turned on the good guys. And the good guys just happened to be her main white blood cell. And, she's had a bone blood disorder ever since. And it really does open your eyes to wonder if she had never been vaccinated to start with, would this have come up in her anyway? Would this have been something that had never been triggered? Because it was definitely like it was triggered in her body. You know what I'm saying? Like she had a perfect blood count that morning, white blood cell count things, and perfect count, doing great. Had that happen, and before that night fell, she was already sitting at 0 and stayed at 0. I mean, if she wasn't having Neupogen, she was sitting at 0. You know, so I mean, it was just like, I mean, it was like an immediate body switch. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I'm reading through some of the comments that are happening on the post that you've got. Where you announced that the show starts in 5 minutes, and there's some interesting comments in here, right? Yes, there is a possibility. Like you posted this publicly, so I hope you don't mind me saying your name, Suzanne. But Suzanne Origin says, about pre-screening kids, then they'll use it as an excuse to force others who don't meet the pre-screening requirements. What about people with long-term problems who the pre-screening tests would miss? And that's a very good point.
Right.
That's a very, very good point. There's a possibility they'll say, well, you don't have this mitochondrial enzymatic deficiency. You're not at risk based on these pre-screening things that we've done. That means you have to get vaccinated. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry, but because as Laura Fisher Anderson commented that even if we're trying to find people with markers and stuff like that we still need to have that choice to not vaccinated. And she says just like I said about the chocolate milk. I completely agree with that, you guys. Like those of you who are commenting on there that. Yes, I totally agree that possibly if we implement this thing about pre-screening, that they will use it as a way to, say, well, those that are, okay from the pre-screening, you have to get vaccinated and mandate that.
Right.
There's a possibility they might do that. I completely agree. Now, if that's the case, then the systems should be in place. Like I completely agree with the freedoms that people are fighting for, right? Like a medical exemption, a medical, exemption choice should definitely be there. A religious exemption choice should definitely be there. But more than both of those two things, and I say more because it really should be, in my view, it really should be this. More than both of those two exemptions, I think what's more important is having a philosophical exemption, right? If I flat out just say I don't want to, that should be good.
Yep.
I don't think you should.
I think exemptions should be taken off the table. That's one of the things that I think needs to be visited whenever we finally get everybody's butts in gear and have this march, because that is one of the things that needs to be revisited. There should be no, I have to sign this because I don't want to do this. It should be, okay, I don't want to do this, end of story. I don't understand why I've got to jump through all these hoops and all these other things, insurance companies, all these other people. I don't care about them. This is my life, my family, my choice.
I think the philosophical quote exemption is more important. I shouldn't have to jump through hoops. I shouldn't have to do any of that. If I don't want to, I shouldn't have to. Listen, tomorrow, if I want to go to the store, buy a fifth of vodka and 4 packs of cigarettes and smoke and drink all of that, right? You have the right to do that. That is not going to go well for you, by the way, to do those things. But you know what I mean? Like, if someone wants to do that, man, shit, that's your choice, bro. Like. And here's the other thing, okay? I personally believe that four-year universities, all this college debt, all this I would have to say most colleges, right, and universities, I think it's a bad thing. I literally want to tell. I'm just going to start doing it. I'm going to start telling people that ask me, because I get this question a lot, okay? What university do you think I should go to? Do you think I should go to university? And then I'd be like, well, what are you going to do there? And they're like, well, I don't know. If they say I don't know, I'll be like, well, don't go then. What's the point of going and spending a bunch of money at an institution where you're probably just going to get, programmed into some kind of dogmatic idea about the field of study that you're going to go into, when you're much better off taking the things that you're interested in, saying, okay, I'm going to find the person that's really good at doing the thing that I'm interested in. Then I'm going to intern for them for free, or do a small paid internship or something like that, and work my butt off, okay, and pay my dues and eat shit for a few years, right? Really learn the game, and then go launch my own thing, and then be awesome at what I do. Like, that's so much more valuable than being like, I'm going to go sit in a class and listen to a guy explain the theoretical aspects of what I'm doing. Like, hey, when you get out of that and you got a piece of paper that said you learned that shit, you still don't know what it's like to work in the actual world. You really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many people that are listening here even have a clue that I have a actual college degree in radio and television. Like, how many of you even know that? You know what I mean? Like,
I didn't even know they had degrees for that. No, I'm just playing.
Right, exactly. No, it's funny, Lynette, but I've told people that before, and they're like, wow, they have degrees for that? And I'm like, you'd be surprised. Like, I had to
you're awesome at what you do.
I had to write a 30-page essay in one of my classes why it's the pros and cons and differences between stereo recording versus mono recording. And most of you are like, wait, what? A 30-page essay? Yes, it can get that in-depth.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I didn't ever go to college anew, but I did my friend's art history homework. So I had to write, like, compare and contrast papers on, like, Edvard Munch and Francis Bacon, and draw things by Georgia O'Keeffe. And I did all kinds of stuff like that for one of my friends. I'm not going to say her name so her teacher doesn't know. But no. So I got to experience some of the college experience for free just from doing a friend's work, because she had such a hard time in that subject, and it was just easy for me. I just enjoyed it. So she would come back and she's like, oh, my gosh, I got an A on this, and it'd be funny because I dropped out of high school, did the GED route, all those kind of things, and somehow getting this college student hundreds on their, schoolwork.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too, right? Is that I'm not saying that. I will say this right now. I am not good at what I do. I'm going to say I'm great at what I do. I know I'm great at what I do. And that's not an ego thing. Like, I know. I'm great at what I do, not because I went to college for it. I'm great at what I do because I worked my ass off to learn how to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want anybody to ever think, I've mentored quite a few people in doing what I do, and helped them learn the things that I do. And I've always told them, like, listen, it doesn't matter that I went to college for what I did. It does not matter that I've got a bachelor's degree for what I did. It really doesn't. I am not good at this because of that. I'm good at this for this reason, because I busted ass to figure out how to do this. And let me teach you how to bust ass and learn how to do this so you can be awesome and one day be better than me. Like, I want people to literally be better than me. There's people that I'm teaching right now to do what I do, and they are learning so quickly. And I can't wait for the day where I'm like, you know what? You're better at this than I am now. And there's already instances where this one person that I'm teaching how to do this, there's certain things that he does, and he's better at those things than I am already. And he's only been,
the student
working with
becomes
me for like a year. Yeah, dude, it's awesome. Like, I've had him teaching me certain things, because he fixated on one thing that I never really fixated on and never really got that good at it. I was good at it, but he is so much better at it than I am. And so now, when there's questions about that thing, I'm like, hey, man, how to do this thing? And he's like, oh, that's easy, bro. And then he teaches me and shows me how to do it. And that's so awesome, because the student has become the teacher in certain aspects. And one day I really do believe that he will be better than I am. And I can't wait for that day. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think that everybody's, they're getting there.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was just going to say, you're coming down on the line here with the time if you want to cut to or cut to ads and stuff.
Yeah, we're about to break for commercial break, everybody. I should be hopefully seeing Paul in the dashboard in just a few. I know his area code he told me he's calling from, so I'm just kind of watching the dashboard to see when he joins. I'm going to hit a commercial break, everybody, and hopefully by the time I finish playing these commercials, I see him in the dashboard. Anu, thank you for joining me. Up there he is. I see him now. Thank you for joining me for the first hour, Anu. As always, I love you, my friend, and I'm going to jump to these commercial break, and then we are going to be on with Dr. Paul Offit. So everybody just hang in there. And, Paul, I see you in the dashboard. Don't leave. It's going to be some awake commercials. That's just how we roll on Freedomizer. All right, y'all.
Yeah.
Anu, have an amazing week. I'll talk to you next Monday.
Love you, Lynette. Thank you. And thank
Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Misty'sGardens.com. Now, this is a contraption where you can grow food in your apartment, in a small patio, or if you're like me and you absolutely suck at gardening, this makes life a lot easier. It is a vertical tower garden. We can grow over 20 things at once in a small, compacted area. Good health starts with good habits, like eating wholesome foods. And with tower gardens, you can easily grow your own fresh, nutrient-rich food virtually anywhere, year-round, without soil. So, Misty'sGardens.com, have a look at it, check it out, buy it, plant, and like it. Misty'sGardens.com.
Vaccines are required for students, employees, immigrants, military members, and international travel. Do you know how to legally avoid them? This is vaccine rights attorney and Freedomizer radio host Alan Phillips. My vaccine exemption ebook can help you avoid the mistakes that have cost others their exemption rights. Get the authoritative guide to vaccine legal exemptions, an ebook available at freedomizerradio.com and vaccinerights.com.
Let freedom ring throughout the land.
You know the Constitution like the back of your hand. You've read books, listened to podcasts, attended lectures, surfed websites, and watched videos. You've made liberty your life's goal, but something seems to be missing. Stickers from LibertyStickers.com. Exercise your freedom of speech with the world's most dangerous bumper stickers. That's LibertyStickers.com. But wait, there's more. You can buy Liberty Stickers wholesale. Get them for 99 cents each when you put 100 or more in your shopping cart in any combination. Sell them or give them away. They're great for gun shows, flea markets, fairs, outreach, and more. Earn extra money, promote freedom, and spread the word. Need custom stickers, labels, or decals for your organization or business? Liberty Stickers makes them. Go to LibertyStickers.com to order or call 877-873-9626. LibertyStickers.com, the world's most dangerous stickers.
All right, everybody, we are back. I am Lynette Marie Barron, your host, and you are listening to Forsaken Generation Radio Show. This week's show is going to be a little different, and I am excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Paul Offit, on the show. Can you hear me?
I can, Lynette, yes.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. It is amazing to be able to have an armistice for a day and just be able to conversate. You and I have not had a problem really conversating, so I appreciate you joining me today.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, it looks, I was doing some reading about Philly, and I found Philadelphia kind of interesting. It seems like you're in a really amazing city. I've never actually got to visit there, but you guys are a city of firsts for sure. And, I guess hosting America's birthday pretty much. You guys are one of the first city in our nation, so that's kind of awesome. That's something that, unless you looked it up, you wouldn't have known.
I know. The Philadelphia Eagles lost last night, so the city's a little depressed. But otherwise, you're right. It's a good city to live in.
Yeah, I used to follow football when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I don't know, become more of a baseball kind of girl. I'm a Red Sox lady myself, so I don't know much about the football anymore. High school is when the women pay attention to football because all the players. Once you get out of high school, I think the women quit paying attention. But I think that just might be how it goes. But yeah, you guys were the first to have a medical school. Philadelphia, the first home to the first hospital. So it's and also a place where at least 1 in 6 physicians train. So. That's something that, I found very interesting because it seems like Philadelphia is a mecca of doctors.
Yeah, no, the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine was founded in 1765. The Pennsylvania Hospital was the nation's first public hospital. It's about 4 blocks from where I live downtown. So, yeah, it's an historic city.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll have to check it out one day. I actually have family that's all up north and still have yet to meet. So I look forward to all the road trips I hope to take one day when I'm actually financially able. You know how that goes. Well, I wanted to tell you I really do appreciate you being on here with me today. And I know I've read your book, Bad Advice, and I appreciate you sending me that. And I see you have literally like 10 books. Am I correct? Is that the right number here?
Right, sort of 9 works of narrative nonfiction. That's right. So and then a couple advice books. But yes, that's pretty much it, right?
Okay. Well, some of them are. I look forward to getting in the future, just for the fact that I'm kind of curious to see, more of what's in them. Some of them seem like you kind of talk a lot about disproving things in medicine as well, and I find that interesting because I feel like a lot of people who look at certain chemicals or certain toxins or even certain pharmaceuticals and things of that nature still always have such a hard time looking at vaccines. And looking at your credential list, to me, it would seem you would definitely be one of the people to talk to about vaccines. So, I'm curious, for you, have you seen, as a doctor, in your being a pediatrician at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, if you have a parent who comes to you who tells you that they've seen what they believe to be a vaccine injury or a reaction, how do you deal with that as a physician, working at a children's hospital? What is for you, what is the protocol where you are if someone believes their child has been vaccine injured?
Well, certainly, anything that has a positive effect in medicine can have a negative effect. Vaccines are no different. So the most common adverse effect associated with vaccines is an allergic reaction, so-called, type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, which can present as, hives and sometimes difficulty breathing and sometimes low blood pressure, which is why you're actually asked to actually stay in the doctor's office for around 15 minutes or so after you've gotten a vaccine. So that's the most common. It's not, it's the most common even though it's uncommon. It occurs in about 1 per 1.4 million doses. So it's rare, but it's real. Other serious vaccine adverse events was one you actually just read about in the last few days. There was, I don't know if you read the story, but there was an oncologist, a very well-known, famous oncologist who, traveling to a yellow fever endemic country, or a country where yellow fever was common, he got a yellow fever vaccine and died from that vaccine. The phenomenon is called viscerotropic disease, which is sort of a fancy way of saying that yellow fever vaccine can itself cause yellow fever, and yellow fever, has a mortality rate of around 20%, and so he died from that vaccine. Now, it's rare. It occurs in roughly 1 per 2.5 million doses, but it's real. So that's another sort of serious vaccine side effect. And I trained at a time, when the oral polio vaccine was given. We sort of switched from the oral polio vaccine to the inactivated vaccine around 2000, but the oral polio vaccine could itself revert to so-called wild-type polio and cause polio, so-called vaccine-associated paralytic polio. That, too, was rare. It occurred in 1 per 2.4 million doses, but it was real. So, there are side effects to vaccines. I think what's happened, though, is that a lot of parents reasonably will assume that a temporal association, meaning an association in time, is a causal association, meaning got a vaccine and now my child has developmental delays or diabetes or multiple sclerosis or autism or attention deficit disorder, and that's been caused by vaccines, which studies haven't supported.
Okay, yeah, I know there's been some studies that have looked at the correlation between vaccines and autism, and there's been some stuff that has kind of been brought out by, I would actually say, both sides on this topic many times over again. And, I got to say, for me, it's hard for me to see anything outside of what I've seen, first off, in, for me, a personal experience, but then outside of that, talking about the numbers of injury, not looking at even what happened in my little bitty world, but, a lot of vaccine injuries aren't reported. And I think from what I understood, the last I heard, the CDC had said only 1% was reported. So I don't, I'm horrible at math. But it makes those numbers go a lot different than one in a million or 1 in 1.5 million. It definitely changes them a lot when only 1% or even give them the best 10% would be reported, because a lot of doctors almost seem afraid to report vaccine injury. I know for me, when I went through this with my own daughter, it was crazy to watch how this all played out, and I never had a reason to think anything could have happened. You know what I mean? Like, I have 5 kids, vaccinated all my older children, was vaccinated myself growing up. Never would have thought something could happen as an adverse event. Just didn't ever even cross my mind. Just like everybody else out there. I mean, you know what I mean? Most of the population wouldn't think even it's possible, and that's just the way it goes. But when it happens in front of you, it's really hard to go, this just isn't possible anymore, because it's almost like if you were, believing in the Christian faith and all of a sudden Jesus appears to you. Once you've seen him, you're going to believe. So, it's kind of that thing kind of happened in my life with my children. I wish it didn't. I wish, for anything I could go back and change it. But, I don't know if I'm sure as a doctor and a pediatrician, you know what autoimmune neutropenia is. And, my daughter was a perfect blood cell count every time she'd ever had a count as a baby until her 15-month shots. And they gave her 6 and 2 were triples, and she had a 0 count of neutrophils ever since. We went, we've got hematologists. We at first had oncologists. We went through, all kinds of stuff to try to figure out what had happened. And it all traced back to the first fever, which started 21 6 days straight of fever. They all traced it back. This was the vaccines. They overwhelmed her system, and her body didn't know what was good and what was bad, and they said it literally just turned on its own white blood cell count. And this was from her hematologist and oncologist. I had no clue this was even possible. I didn't even, it took me a long time to even understand in my mind what that meant. And so as a physician, if a parent, is in, in your care and something like that were to happen, do you report that to VAERS? Is that worthy of being reported in your mind? Because I know a lot of doctors they seem afraid, or they seem like they don't even know that system exists. And so it would feel like it's very hard to get an accurate number.
Okay, so the VAERS, or the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, has been around since it was put into law in 1986, but it then sort of became functional around 1988. So anybody can report to VAERS. Anybody. You can, pharmacists can, doctors can, nurses can, personal injury lawyers can. Anybody can report to VAERS. It's a one-page form that's filled out and then is sent into a system that is essentially co-monitored by both the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration. So it is at best a hypothesis-generating mechanism, meaning my child was fine, now they got a vaccine, and now they have this problem. Could the problem have been caused by the vaccine? Now, that's not a proof. I mean, a temporal association, an association in time is not a proof. The only way to see whether or not, for example, in this case, autoimmune neutropenia is more likely to be associated with a child who's vaccinated as compared to a child who's not, is to look at large numbers of children who have or haven't been vaccinated to see whether or not autoimmune neutropenia is more common in the vaccinated group. And when at least those kinds of studies have been done, I'm not saying for autoimmune neutropenia, I've seen those studies, but for example, as a general, when those kinds of studies have been done, they don't show that a lot of these concerns that parents have, who say that they're, that like you, that that their child has been vaccine damaged, is borne out. I mean, I'll give you an example. My wife is a private practicing pediatrician. She came into the office on a weekend and was helping the nurse give vaccines. There was a mother sitting at the side of the room with a 4-month-old on her lap, and while my wife was drawing the vaccine up into a syringe, the 4-month-old had a seizure and went on to have a permanent seizure disorder, epilepsy, and by age 5 or 6 actually had died of a chronic neurological condition. Now, if my wife had given that vaccine 5 minutes earlier, I think there is no amount of statistical data in the world that would have convinced that mother of anything other than the vaccine caused it, even though it didn't, because, she never gave it. But, I can see where a mother would be, compelled by this association in time. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear that the hematologists said that. I just don't think there are good data to support that. So I know it's not what you want to hear, and I'm sure it's not what people who are listening to this radio show want to hear, but you've asked me on, so I'll give you my sense of it.
Yeah. That's what I want. I want you to, and slow down. You don't have to rush through. We've got plenty of time.
No, that's my mother. My mother talks this quickly. Blame her.
I'm usually a fast talker, but I just want to be able to just actually, and have this conversation and don't feel rushed. I mean, honestly, it's sad to me that you're not able to have this conversation with somebody a little smarter than me, but I'm doing my best, and hopefully that's good for everybody else, and if not, they'll get over it.
No, I'll tell you what, Lynette. The reason that the reason I came on the show was, I mean, we sat next to each other, I think, a couple times at ACIP, and you just strike me as a loving person who's religious and who cares and who wants to have a reasonable conversation. So, although I don't think this is my, home field here, you are compelling. Plus, although I don't know you that well, you seem that your life hasn't been all that easy, and so it just seems like a reasonable thing for me to do.
Well, thank you, and it definitely has not, but that's okay. That's what makes us stronger and keeps us going, and I tell everybody, all those little battles made me stronger for the war, and, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I have been, told, Paul Offit has said that, and I've seen video clips of this, and I don't know if they were edited or not, so that's why I'm asking you here, right here, where you've said that if parents choose not to vaccinate their children, they should be taken by the state. Like, that kind of cut me to my core, because, like, my daughter, per se, like, she, after her injury, her doctors told me she could not have a live virus vaccine, period, that it could literally wipe her out, and that we had to be so careful, because even some of the dead virus or, killed virus vaccines still have other viruses in them that could be live that aren't even supposed to be in there. And this is something her hematologist told us, and said it's just best for her if she's not vaccinated at all. And
if she's neutropenic, if she's neutropenic, then you're right. Her ability to handle vaccines is not going to be the same as other children. She's immune compromised, so that's true. She shouldn't receive live attenuated viral vaccines. That was good advice. But in terms of the thing that you had mentioned before, the notion of me saying that if a child's not vaccinated, they should be taken by the state. I don't know where people got that from. I never said that. I mean, I can only imagine it was edited or spliced in or something. I would never say that. I mean, I think that I would never say. It's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, because that, like I said, that one struck me to my core a little bit, because, I mean, like I say, for me, this is not something I ever saw myself doing. And honestly, I don't know how I got here. I call myself an accidental activist. But for me, not only did that happen to my daughter, but, I don't know if you know my story, but 2 weeks prior to that, I received the vaccine while pregnant. And I was 26 weeks pregnant, and I was given a Tdap. And this is something that is common practice in America. And this was my 5th child, and, never any other real issues outside of what happened to Lily, weeks later when she was vaccinated. And when Jasmine was born, she was small, but she seemed normal to me so far, like right at birth, and a good APGAR, whatever you want to call it, all that stuff. But then as she started to grow, you could tell there was definitely something not right. And her poor little head was misshapen, her little ears were off center, and her behavior, there was no meeting of milestones, and it just really, everybody kept saying, oh, she'll catch up, she'll be fine, and I had no idea what autism was. I didn't even know it existed, no clue. So, and I really just started finding out what had happened to Lily during her injury through her doctors. And so I told her, my OB, I was like, well, you remember I got that, Tdap when I was pregnant. And she said, yeah, there are a lot of complications with that, and even with Pitocin for women out there who are getting Pitocin during delivery. That's something that has got a lot of risk to it. But, that can increase these issues. But, it's kind of interesting to see how these things aren't tested in pregnancy. Flu shots either, and then, I think women believe when they go to their doctor that it's been tested fully, and that's what I thought when they tell me I have to get it, and then you kind of are the post-market data, though. And I don't know if you remember last time you saw me, but the shirt I was wearing says, we're done being your post-market data. But that's really the way I feel, because if you think about the way that we're living this, though, and I just want to know on a moral level if you see what I'm saying. Us parents out here are especially being, pregnant women, when you're told this has been tested and it's okay and it's safe and effective, but you're really the test, and you're not told that. Do you see what I mean with that? Like, the post-market data is people who really don't realize they are the test subject.
Okay, so here's what I would say. So you're right that there are two vaccines that are given in pregnancy. One is Tdap, primarily for the pertussis or whooping cough component, because every year in this country there are about 20 to 25 children who die of whooping cough, and when they die, they're always less than 3 months of age, and they're not going to be protected by the active vaccine that they get at 2, 4, and 6 months of age. The only way they're going to be protected from dying is if the pregnant woman is inoculated with pertussis-containing vaccine. So that's one. I'm going to get to sort of the post-marketing stuff in a second. The other vaccine is the influenza vaccine. So those two vaccines are given in pregnancy. The reason the influenza vaccine is given in pregnancy is to protect the child to some extent when they're born, because then you passively transfer antibodies through the placenta to that baby, so they're protected against flu in the first 6 months of life before they're going to get a flu vaccine, which isn't recommended until 6 months of age. The second reason, probably the biggest reason, is to protect the mother. I mean, you're about 7 times more likely to die of pneumonia influenza pneumonia as a pregnant woman than a woman of the same age who isn't pregnant. So that's probably the main reason. So your question is a fair one. I mean, is it when you are recommended to receive a vaccine in pregnancy, is it tested in pregnant women? The answer to the question is yes. It would never be licensed by the Food and Drug Administration unless it was protected, unless it was tested, to a level that they consider to be showing it to be safe and effective. Now you could argue, and this is a reasonable argument, you're not going to test it in millions of people before licensure. You're only going to test it in thousands of people before line-licensure. So isn't it possible that you're not going to know about a problem until after a vaccine is licensed? In fact, Maurice Hilleman, who I consider to be kind of the father of modern vaccines, said it best. He said, quote, "I never breathe a sigh of relief until the first 3 million doses are out there." Well, that's never going to happen pre-licensure. That's only going to happen post-licensure. So is that fair? And I think there are systems in place, like the Vaccine Safety Data Link and others, to look post-licensure. There's phase 4 post-marketing studies to look at vaccines post-licensure to see whether there's a problem. Now, both the influenza vaccine and the pertussis vaccine now for years have been given to millions of pregnant women, and there are clear studies showing that those two vaccines don't cause, congenital birth defects, which would be the biggest concern, or any other problems that are severe. I mean, I think any parent could reasonably worry, when I'm getting a vaccine during pregnancy, that's at a time when my baby's developing. Isn't that a time when they're most likely to be hurt? Yes, which is why you need to make sure that you do both pre-licensure and post-marketing and post-licensure testing, which has been done. I mean, the pertussis vaccine is just 5 individual inactivated proteins from whooping cough, and the influenza vaccine is essentially just 2 proteins on the surface of the hemagglutinin, and neither of those are live products. And so I think they're safe, and I think they've been shown to be safe. But again, I understand how people are very much emotionally moved by temporal associations. I get that, which is why I think vaccines are so heavily tested pre- and post-licensure, because they're given to healthy children or pregnant mothers. Again, I know this isn't what you want to hear. I know that I'm not preaching.
No,
to the
you're
choir.
fine.
There's
No, you're
no
good.
one on your show
it's just for me.
This,
no, you're fine. It's just for me, like a lot of the inserts, and I mean, I have tons of them, literally tons of them. They say, I haven't found one yet that's recommended for pregnant women that says on it that it is tested on pregnant women. Most of them say that I've found so far. I won't even say most. I'll say all the ones I've seen thus far still say on them has not been tested in pregnant women, and pretty much that it was unethical to do so. But that's what I mean. Like my OB and I were talking about this, and she said that's why for her it's odd to think it's unethical for them to test them on pregnant women, but it's ethical for the OB to have to do the testing. I mean, that's the way it really, by everything you can see out here from our angle, that's the way all that really plays out. And I feel like, I wasn't a willing participant.
How about if after this show is over, if you can just email me your address, I'll send you the articles that have looked at the safety of those 2 vaccines in pregnancy, so you can get a sense of at least what data are out there.
Yeah, I would love that. I appreciate that. That would be great. I'd love to get more and more data. I told you, I will read anything on either side of this because I want to know everything. To people out there who are closed-minded to thinking like this, or to talking to people like Paul Offit, or to trying to even see, you have to look at everything. You have to learn everything. If you don't, how are you doing what is best for your family? And for me, I want you to understand me just as much as I want to understand you. And I think everybody really needs to think like that for us to get anywhere. I really do. And you have a quote in your book, Pandora's Lab. You say, even the most promising innovations can have intended and sometimes lethal consequences, and I agree with that. And it seems like it happens a lot more often than not. And a lot of the things that people really do believe they're doing the right thing with or are really good for society and, the human race at large, sometimes they get it wrong. And sometimes they get it wrong to a epic level. And, what do you think about maybe pre-screening people? Because I know that mitochondrial disorders and a lot of things like that do play a big role in the people who are more susceptible to injury. Do you think that pre-screening would be a step in the right direction to, maybe keeping the injury level down?
Well, certainly if there are situations where it is known that, say, a particular genetic disorder puts one at risk for a side effect from a vaccine, sure. For example, children with sickle cell disease don't mount as good of an immune response to organisms that have so-called, polysaccharide capsules like pneumococcus and Haemophilus influenza type B and meningococcus. Sure. But I think the best case scenario when you do pre-licensure studies is that you test them in a representative population of children involving a variety of ethnic backgrounds, which will then invariably include, some of the genetic issues that come up in those different ethnic backgrounds. So I think, sure. I don't know if you know this, but I was fortunate enough to participate with the team here at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that created the strains in our laboratory that became the vaccine Rototec. So that vaccine was in a phase 3 in a big sort of pre-licensure trial, was tested in 70,000 children, in 11 different countries over. In 11 different countries over a 4-year period. To make sure that it was what it was claimed to be, i.e., meaning safe and effective, and it was. Now that's 70,000 children's not 10 million children or 100 million children. So you have to make sure that when the vaccine then is licensed, which it was by the Food and Drug Administration in 2006, and then recommended for universal use in children, which it also was by the CDC in 2006, that there's then something in place to make sure that as the vaccine rolls out into this country, that you're looking at children who've been vaccinated and who haven't been vaccinated to see whether there's a problem. And that's the so-called vaccine safety data link. So I do think, I think that people should be somewhat reassured that there is a system in place, the so-called vaccine safety data link, to look at vaccines when they're first put on the market to make sure that there isn't a problem. I think, we would do well to have a drug safety data link. I think if we'd had that, we would have found out that Vioxx, for example, was a rare cause of heart attacks much quicker than we did find it. And you're right. I'm glad you looked at Pandora's Lab. The subtitle of that book is 7 Stories of Science Gone Wrong. There are situations where our reach exceeds our grasp, and I think we do have to be humble about scientific advances to make sure we're not doing more harm than good. And I think there have to be systems in place to look at that. Otherwise, we'll lose trust with the American public, which to some extent I think we have, but I think in some ways not fairly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know that there's a lot of studies out here. I wish that on our side of the issue that could be presented at ACIP the same way science on the vaccines is presented, because a lot of the stuff, I don't know, I'm pretty sure you know Christopher Exley and who he is, and all about his studies with brains of, I guess it was 100 people with autism, and just showing the aluminum intracellular and, the amount of aluminum in the brains and how it was carried there. Things like this that come out, I think that it would be smart for groups like, especially the CDC, to be looking at and to be talking about and to be, corresponding with people like him. But it seems like those kind of people are almost shunned out of those kind of environments and not welcome. And I don't understand that.
Here's what I would say. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Lynette. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just going to say, do you Do you talk to people on both sides of this? Do you look at science like that? Did you read? And I know JB's book. I know JB is not a scientist, but his book is full of a reference of science of and all kinds of other things. Do you look at things from both sides of this, or are you more of a blinders on kind of person?
Those are my two choices. Here's what I would say. I think that I think that there's not two sides. I think that we all are on the same side. I think you and I are on the same side. I think the people that listen to the show and I are on the same side, which is to try and make sure that when we are giving vaccines to children, that they're safe and that they are effective. Because if they aren't, we shouldn't be giving them, and that we need to make sure that we're doing the kinds of studies to answer the questions that are raised. And so one raises a reasonable question. Aluminum, which is used as an adjuvant in vaccines, and by adjuvant what I mean is adjuvant sort of enhance the immune response, allowing you to give either fewer doses of the vaccine or to give lesser quantities of the active ingredient. That's what an adjuvant does. I mean, aluminum is a natural product, and aluminum is in the water we drink and the food we eat. I mean, it's a very common light metal in the environment. So we're all exposed to aluminum all the time. There's no avoiding aluminum, but the fact of the matter is we eat aluminum. We drink aluminum. We don't inject aluminum. So it's a fair question to ask, when you inject aluminum, are you putting children at unnecessary risk? There have been a few excellent studies looking at this. One by, I think the first author's name, I think it was Korkowski, but I'm happy to send you the article. He did what I consider to be a perfect study. What he did was he looked at aluminum levels in blood. He looked at aluminum levels in hair. He then looked at the vaccine history, and this is in many children, and then he did sort of psychological tests on those children to answer the question, was there any relationship between your likelihood of receiving aluminum in vaccines, the amount of aluminum that you have in hair, which is sort of a repository along with bones of aluminum, and developmental delays? Is there any association between those two things? And he found that there wasn't, and that's consistent with other observations. So again, I think that the best data don't support this. I think there are a lot of studies out there which are not indicative. And I'll give you another example. It's what I would call this sort of tobacco science. So when the notion was brought up in the early 1950s that cigarette smoking could cause cancer, the two studies that were done were excellent. They were done, interestingly, in doctors who smoked, which is at least ironic. But what they looked at was the relationship between your smoking and whether or not you were likely to develop lung cancer. And they found out not only that there was a relationship, but that there was a dose-response relationship. The more you smoked, the more likely you were to get lung cancer. Well, the tobacco industry hated that. So what they did was they sort of countered and said, no, look at all these studies we've done with mice, or these studies we've done with rats exposed to large quantities of smoke. They don't develop cancer. Therefore, cigarette smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. So the best studies are the epidemiological studies, which is to say the study that I just mentioned by Korkowski, which is there a relationship between receiving vaccines, the evidence that you've received vaccines, i.e. aluminum in your hair, but remember you're getting aluminum from other sources, and then, developmental outcomes. And there was no relationship consistently. So it's always about the strength, internal consistency, robustness, and most importantly, reproducibility of data. If vaccines caused autism, I'm with you. I think that they should in no sense be mandated. But vaccines don't cause autism. I think the other way to look at this is, how about that oncologist, the cancer specialist who just died of a yellow fever vaccine? I mean, he was about to go to presumably, I don't know his story, but I know that he did die of a yellow fever vaccine, and that the yellow fever vaccine can cause death. He was about to go to a yellow fever endemic area, an area where yellow fever occurred. Should he have been made to get that vaccine, knowing that as an older man that he was at increased risk? Now, the risk is still small. It was 1 per 2.5 million doses. And if he goes to a yellow fever endemic area, he might catch yellow fever. And if he gets yellow fever, he has a 20% chance of dying. So I think his choices were either don't go to that area, or realize that when you get that vaccine, that you're taking some risk, although the rate of risk is obviously going to the area. But you know what I'm saying? So I'm with you that vaccines do cause serious effects. But and the oral polio vaccine, I think, that's the best example. To me, my favorite vaccine activist was a guy named John Salamone. He was actually a guy who was I think he was the head of the Italian American Association, but it's a good guy whose son got the oral polio vaccine and got polio from the oral polio vaccine. He argued, I didn't know this. I didn't know that polio could be caused by the oral polio vaccine. Nobody told me that. Worse, there is another vaccine, the inactivated vaccine, which was not commercially available in the United States, but was commercially available in other countries that had essentially eliminated polio, only using that inactivated vaccine, the so-called Salk vaccine. His son got the Sabin vaccine, the oral polio vaccine, which caused his son as a little boy to develop polio. And his son recently, just within the past couple of months, died of polio. Now, he argued, I didn't know this. It was the responsibility of this country to let me know that the vaccine could do that, and they didn't. And so he became a vaccine safety activist. He formed a group called Informed Parents Against Vaccine-Associated Paralytic Polio. And he would go to these meetings like the American Academy of Pediatrics meetings and others, and frankly, Lynette, he wasn't treated all that well. I think he was sort of pushed to the side. I think people did not want to hear his story. But his story was a fair one. Although we eliminated polio from the United States by the year 1980, we didn't eliminate polio caused by the polio vaccine. So every year we would see 6 to 8 children get polio from the polio vaccine. The only polio we had in this country, starting from 1980, was from the polio vaccine. I mean, when I came onto the CDC Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices in 1998, I was on the committee till about 2003. I asked to be the head of the polio working group because I wanted to move us away from the oral polio vaccine. I thought the time had well come past when we should have done that. And I asked John Salamone to be on that committee. I wanted his voice on that committee. I thought he was a parent who represented how bad this could be. And so I came on in 1998. By 2000, we'd moved from the oral polio vaccine to the inactivated vaccine. But there was some resistance because it was obviously much more expensive to give the inactivated vaccine, but that didn't matter because there were 6 to 8 children every year who suffered needlessly from that vaccine. So to me, that's a vaccine safety activist because he was right. And I think sadly, and his son just died within the past couple of months. His son's name was David, and just breaks your heart because it was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, and I mean, any injury to me, any injury is too many. Any death is too many. And Anu and I, my buddy Anu Vaidya, we were just talking this morning, and I always think of Lord Farquaad from Shrek, and I know you probably have seen that movie too because you're not immune to the world. And I always think about that though, because he says some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make. And that's how I really feel about the situation because and I know you say now this is where we do get along on this one. We are on the same side when it comes to humanity and wanting the best for people. And I wonder, sometimes, it's hard for me because, man, it's like a conflict of my brain because I wonder with all of your credentials, with all the things that you must have looked at the same thing, the same side that I'm talking about with a more open mind. Did you read JB's book? Just for my personal, I just want to know if you read it because I know a friend of mine gave you her personal copy and she was kind of kicking herself because she had to go rebuy it. So were you actually, or did you thumb through it at least or anything?
No. I didn't.
No? Okay.
I didn't because I don't like JB Hanley. I think he's done things I really haven't liked, not the least of which was sending a very negative email to my wife. He's only vilified me, I'm sure, without looking, but I'm going to take a wild guess, and I don't think I'm wrong on, that I'm sure he's vilified me in the book. He is one of those people, and this is not you, and this is why I like being on your program. There are people who are opposed to vaccines, who choose to make it personal, who attack me either by sending me hate mail or negative emails, who have attacked me physically, who have threatened my life. And J.B. Hanley, to me, falls under the category of someone who likes to vilify those who disagree with him. And so I think little of him. And so I didn't read his book, no. But if you did, then I'm going to take a wild guess that I'm in his book and I'm a very bad guy, a guy whose motivations aren't what my motivations are, which are yours, which is why I think we both are on the same side, which is to protect children. I mean, where you and I disagree is not on whether or not vaccines should be held to the highest standard of safety because they're given to healthy children. It's to what extent we value certain studies like the Christopher Exley study as compared to other studies which I think haven't supported him. I mean, I think on balance, science does win out, which, or said another way, that I think scientific truths do emerge. I think that Andrew Wakefield's hypothesis or contention that the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine caused autism was reasonable to raise. I mean, you can raise a hypothesis. Does MMR cause autism? The good news is that's a testable hypothesis. You can determine whether that's true. There have been 17 studies now done in 7 countries on 3 different continents looking at hundreds of thousands of children who either did or didn't get that vaccine to show that you're at no greater risk of getting autism if you got that vaccine or if you didn't. So Andrew Wakefield was wrong. His hypothesis was wrong. I think you can say at this point that a truth has emerged. Now you could argue, but there's a study, there's Andrew Wakefield's study. I mean, look at that. That's a study. It really wasn't a study. It was just a case series. I mean, he didn't have a control group, meaning a group that did or didn't receive MMR vaccine. But it's so I think how can I say this? I think that there are 6,500 medical and scientific journals in this world. There are 4,000 scientific or medical studies that are published a day. I mean, not surprisingly, they follow a bell-shaped curve. Some are excellent, some are awful, most are more or less mediocre. You can find a scientific paper that claims anything. So the question becomes, is that claim reproducible? Do other people find the same thing, working on different countries and on different populations of children? Are they finding the same thing? And what I would say to this point, Lynette, is that to date we haven't defined we haven't been able to show that vaccines cause autism. And I know this is not what you want to hear, but I'm open-minded to the point that if there are excellent data that show it, I'm all for it. I'm all for looking at those data and seeing whether they're strongly internally consistent and robust and reproducible. And if that's true, then I'm wrong. But so far that's not the case. Those studies aren't there yet.
Well,
this is what
I do wish you had been able to put you. You're fine. I just was going to say I do wish you had been able to put you and JB's differences aside, because his personal issue or story or whatever you want to say is only a little bit of his book. Really, it's just a lot of things compiled, and it has a lot of, it does have a lot of good information. I've actually read it and listened to it audibly because I try to be, like I said, I've probably read just about every book on our side and probably a lot of the books on yours as well. And I like to be well-read. So, one of the things I will say, if you take anything from talking to me, hopefully it'll be maybe just opening your mind a little bit more to reading more on both sides, just because maybe you don't like the person per se, but there is a lot of things that are in there that are something I think you would benefit from reading and from knowing.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do, Lynette. Here's the deal I'll make with you. I will read his book, but here's what I ask you to do. Realize that I'm on the same side you are, because I am. I'm on the same side you are. I want what's best for children, including your children and my children. And so, I look at those data also. I'm perfectly happy to look at the studies that are described in J.B. Hanley's book, but realize there aren't two sides here. We're both on the same side. The question is, the quality of the data that's generated. What when I was at this meeting in D.C. at the National Press Club, and it's I think I forget, Del Bigtree had gotten a letter from RFK Jr. RFK Jr. wants to debate me about whether mercury in vaccines causes autism. To date, there are 7 studies that have looked at this, and they all are consistent and reproducibly show that mercury at the level that was contained in vaccines doesn't cause either subtle signs of mercury toxicity or autism or developmental delays. And what I would say is that it's not a matter of me debating RFK Jr. or me debating J.B. Handley or our conversation. It's always about the data. It's always about the strength and quality of the data. And for now, the data aren't on that side. When the data are on that side, I mean, so for example, when polio vaccine can cause polio, or the yellow fever vaccine can cause yellow fever, or the swine flu vaccine that was given in 1976 can cause, this ascending paralysis called Guillain-Barré syndrome. When those data are there, they're recognized as being quality data. So I'm not trying to make the case that vaccines don't cause serious side effects or even permanent side effects like the ones we just described, or even death in the case of the yellow fever vaccine. I'm just saying that for now, the data regarding some of the things you're talking about aren't there, but you and I are both on the same side. We are. That's the one thing please take away from this, because I really want you to know that. I came into pediatrics because I love children. I came into working on, rotavirus because rotavirus, causes 2,000 deaths a day in the world, and I thought that, we had the technology that we could develop to prevent it. That's why I do what I do. And so, people like J.B. Handley, when they vilify me, I think are just missing the point.
Do you think that rotavirus vaccine should be given in America? I mean, it's one of those things where I've kind of, after my daughter had intussusception twice after the 2-month and the 4-month round, I did a lot more research and reading into it and trying to understand it. And from what my pediatrician was telling me, it's one of those things where she said, in third world countries, it's a lot more of something she would have recommended or said was necessary, because it, diarrhea for them could be a deadly thing, whereas here you're not going to die in America of dehydration from diarrhea. There's plenty of help in many different levels for that. I would think for the most part there. So I want to understand it better, because I want to understand. I mean, I don't really even. They explained to me what happened to my daughter both times and what they were going to do to fix the problem, but I mean, it was excruciating. I've never seen anybody scream like that. I've never seen pain like that before, and I just want to understand it better, because you created this. Who was a better person to talk to, about this issue? So how does that happen? Why does it happen after the vaccination? Why, even if it is a slim population, I don't know how many are. I can't tell you 1,000% for sure how many injuries are really reported, but I can say I know it's not all of them. And for my daughter, it happened 2 different times documented. So how does this happen with those vaccines? Like, how does it do that to the body?
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. The rotavirus is ubiquitous. No one gets to age 5 without being infected with rotavirus. It causes fever, vomiting, and diarrhea in young children, typically those between 6 months and 24 months of age. Before there was a rotavirus vaccine in this country, everyone was infected with rotavirus by the time they were 5. Every year, about 75,000 children would be hospitalized with severe dehydration caused by rotavirus, and every year between 20 and 60 children would die. When I was a resident at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, I saw a child die of rotavirus-induced dehydration. So your pediatrician is wrong. Children do die in this country, and did routinely die in this country before there was a vaccine. Now, it was as many as 60 children a year. You could argue that's not a lot unless it's your child, in which case it obviously is a lot. In the world, again, it's about 2,000 children who die a day. So when the first vaccine came out between 1998 and 1999, so-called RotaShield vaccine, it was found to be a rare cause of intussusception, which just means intestinal blockage. It's a serious disorder, and needs to be treated by making sure that you can unblock that intestine, which can be done, and obviously most children survive it. But it's a serious condition. That vaccine was found to cause intussusception, roughly, depending on which study you read, between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 30,000 vaccine recipients. When the next 2 vaccines came into the market in 2006 and 2008, the Vaccine Safety Data Link tried to answer the question, do these vaccines cause intussusception? And the answer was yes, but more rarely, roughly 1 in 50,000 children. Now, what's interesting is if that's true, if that first vaccine was a rare cause of intussusception, the second and third vaccines are a rare cause of intussusception, it begs the question, does natural infection cause intussusception? And that's actually a fairly easy question to answer. What you do is, now that we've essentially replaced natural infection with vaccination, what's happened to the incidence of intussusception in the United States? And the answer is it's stayed about the same or gone down a little bit, which tells you that natural infection also caused intussusception. So the vaccine both causes and prevents intussusception. Now, in terms of whether or not it's worth preventing, in Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, we admitted 400 children every winter with rotavirus-induced dehydration. I mean, that's a bad disease and occasionally a fatal disease. So is it worth preventing? Absolutely. I mean, on balance, have we done more good than harm? Absolutely. There is this side effect, which apparently also appears to be a side effect of the natural infection. So I think, on balance, we've done the right thing. I mean, we don't see, most residents in our hospital now have never seen a case of rotavirus, even though it dominated my residency when I was a resident in the late 1970s.
Well, I know for me, I have tons of friends who are in the education system, who have been teachers for a long time, or who have been even working with special needs in those aspects for a long time. I know for me, I was in a special needs class. Well, I wouldn't say special needs, but I did speech therapy as a child. I had a really, really bad stutter. And so I did speech therapy. And I remember there was maybe 4 other kids in the class, and maybe 2 that had some sort of severe disability. And it seems like these days you literally see school systems that are telling, they're overflooded with all these new these children with mental disorders, which and I mean the numbers of which autism made up were astronomical. And I just don't understand if how that would be, if it's, number one, if it's been there for always, but number 2, how that would be. And the teachers are, they all see this. Have you been able to conversate with anyone on that kind of level who works in the, that sort of industry, who is teaching the special needs children, who has watched the influx of children who, blow up and all those kind of things? Are you able to conversate with someone and kind of see that side of things?
Well, I guess the people that I deal with most are people who work at a group called the Autism Science Foundation. So they, certainly monitor the incidence of autism that occurs in this country, as does the CDC. So to some extent, yeah. So I have a little bit of a sense. But I think your question is a good one. Is the incidence of autism increasing? My sense is yes, from talking to these people, it is increasing. I mean, the question is why? And, obviously one thing that parents were concerned about was whether or not vaccines could be it. And I think it's probably fair to say that of the environmental factors that have been looked at, that's probably been looked at more than any other. And I think to date we haven't found evidence that vaccines are it. But there are certain factors that. So what are the factors that are? I mean, I work. I'm on the 12th floor here at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in the Abramson Research Building. Working on this floor is a guy named Hakan Arson, who's an autism specialist. He's looking at the genetics of autism, and so just in talking to him, we talk periodically about what are the known causes, and certainly there are certain environmental factors that do increase your risk of autism. I mean, if in the first trimester of pregnancy a woman is exposed to thalidomide or valproic acid, which is an anti-seizure medicine, or natural rubella, which is the German measles, that clearly increases the risk of autism. Maternal age, to some extent, does, but not dramatically. Probably the most dramatic is paternal age. I mean, the older that you are as a man when having a child, the more likely you are to have a child with autism. I mean, these aren't absolutes, but they sort of increase one's risk. And so you could argue, that we're older when we have children now than, say, when I was a child. I mean, my parents had me when they were in their early 20s, and that's not as common anymore. I mean, usually people are a little older when they have kids. So maybe that's part of it. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that it is increasing, and I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out why. But at least to date, vaccines don't seem to be the answer.
I kind of have a feeling it's a combination of things, vaccines included, honestly. I think that when you combine the chemicals in our food and the things that are being, there's just so many different aspects. I'm not going to get into all of them, but there are many aspects of things that contribute to our health that, honestly, when you have to spend double the money to buy food that isn't full of chemicals or that isn't bad for you, I just find that to be so sad that that's the norm in our society and it's accepted that way. I'm going broke trying to make sure my kids eat healthy, and that shouldn't be the way it goes. So I would think the junk food should cost more, if anything, but I don't know if I'll ever win that battle. So I want to ask you about this quote as well, because I asked you about something else I heard you said that I thought kind of was shocking, and I've had so many people when they heard that we were going to be speaking who wanted me to ask you about this, and so I'm going to ask this in my own way because I don't like the way other people ask this question. So I want to know the real 10,000 vaccines or adjuvants or whatever the quote was. What was the real quote to that you said, and do you stand by it?
Right. Yeah. This is one I guess I'd like to have back. Yes, I did say that. Here's the context in which I said it. I was asked the question, how many vaccines could a child theoretically receive at once? That was the question. So I think were I smarter, I would have said that people's immune systems are broad and deep and that we can handle even more vaccines than we're getting, or said another way that the common cold is a probably greater immunological challenge than what we get from vaccines, that a scraped knee is a greater immunological challenge than we get from vaccines. But as a viral immunologist, for God knows what reason, I felt compelled to try and actually answer the question. So to do that, I turned to the work of two immunologists at the University of California, San Diego, named Mel Cohn and Rod Langman, who tried to answer the question this way. You know how many immunological components are in vaccines. By immunological component, what I mean is bacterial protein or bacterial polysaccharide, which is just the complex sugar that's on the surface of bacteria, or viral protein. So you know that for each vaccine. I mean, say take the measles vaccine or the influenza vaccine. The influenza vaccine essentially has two proteins in it, the hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And each protein has several epitopes, which is just sort of immunologically distinct regions. So figuring out how many different immunological components in vaccines, knowing how many circulating B cells, which are the kinds of cells that are in your body that make antibodies, knowing how much antibodies it would take to neutralize each of those different immunological components, knowing all those things, how many individual how many individual vaccines could you respond to given the sort of, the vastness of one's immune response? I think the 10,000 number is probably small because we're always making about 1 billion, roughly 10 to the 9th, new B and T cells, which are immunological cells, every day. So I think that 10,000 number is probably small. I mean, but it's a terrible image. I mean, the image that I created by saying that was that a child should get 10,000 vaccines, which was obviously I wasn't saying. I was just trying to answer that the way an immunologist would answer it, and that was my mistake. I regret it. I'm sorry. I mean, it wasn't untrue. It just created a terrible image and made me sound like a monster. But I just wish I had not tried to answer it as an immunologist would answer. And there's a large literature written by people like Mel Cohn and Rod Langman where they go through how many pathogens, meaning viruses or bacteria, could a hummingbird respond to? How many pathogens could an elephant respond to? Obviously, elephants can respond to more than hummingbirds because they have far more antibody-producing cells than do hummingbirds. And so where does man fit in all that? How many could we respond to? And so that's where I got. I mean, I read paper after paper after paper trying to answer that question. And it's in a book called Vaccines where I sort of go through how I derive all that, but the image is terrible. So I'm not proud of that.
So what do you know about immune activation? Because I know I've learned quite a bit about, immune activation is something that, your body would encounter maybe if you're out there and about and you're getting out way more than the average human these days who veges out at home. You would encounter maybe 10 to 16 viruses in a couple year kind of span and naturally out and about that would actually probably affect you in some way. When you're vaccinating somebody, you are not, it's crazy to me that they do so many at once, and those kind of things just off the bat anyway. But when you're vaccinating somebody, you're really bypassing the body's entire system that it's set up for. That it processes these things and it creates them and it makes them waste. Like and even oral vaccines to a point. Depending on what's in them, they can still cause issues. But I think that even that route is still a little bit more. It would seem more thought out than injection, because just by injecting somebody, you are triggering, that inflammation response in the body. And for a lot of people, their body can't handle that, and their body doesn't know what to do with it. And, all kinds of havoc is wreaked. And, I think that it's hard to really know what the numbers are for the injured, unless you're out here actually looking for them and unless you're paying attention. And for me, I can tell you I've never had a shortage of people who, can tell me from start to finish what happened to their family member, or, be it from elderly down to, infant. And, what do you think of sudden infant death and SUDEP and these kinds of things? Do you think that we should be looking at vaccines during these autopsies as a part of that autopsy? Because I keep on wondering how we're getting the numbers of how many people are dying, how many people are becoming ill, if the injuries are not reported correctly, and then people are not being looked at when they pass away for vaccine injury. I'm just curious. Do you think that might be something that could be that should be added to autopsy, where we find out if that played a role, especially if they've been vaccinated within a few months or whatever of their death?
Okay, so I think in what you just said, I sort of found about three different questions. So I'll start with the first one. So when you're in the womb, you're in a sterile environment, assuming there's not a problem. You're in a sterile environment. You don't see bacteria, you don't see viruses. When you enter the birth canal in the world, you're not in a sterile environment anymore. And very quickly you have living on the surface of your body trillions of bacteria. I mean, an adult human has about 10 to the 14th, or said another way, 100 trillion bacteria living on the surface of your body. That's actually more than you have cells in your body. You have about 10 to the 13th, or 10 trillion cells in your body. So you actually have more bacteria on the surface of your body than you have cells in your body, to which you make an immune response. I mean, an adult human, you, me, makes about 5 grams of an immunoglobulin called secretory immunoglobulin A every day. Every day we have a tremendous commitment by our hosts, by our bodies, to spend energy making this antibody. And we do it to make sure that those bacteria that are living on the surface of our body stay on the surface of our body and don't invade and do harm. If you're born without an immune system, like children who have so-called severe combined immunodeficiency syndrome, or SCIDS, those bacteria invade and can kill, which is why we now have, I think in every state in this country, a rule whereby you have to be genetically tested to see if you have SCIDS, so that when you're and then get in line for the sort of bone marrow transplants that then cure that disease. So that's number one. You have trillions of bacteria. Now each single bacterium has between 2,000 and 6,000 immunological components. If you add up the total number of immunological components in vaccines, by immunological component I mean bacterial protein, viral protein, bacterial polysaccharide or complex sugar, it adds up to a little less than 160. So you have trillions of bacteria. Each bacterium has between 2,000 and 6,000 immunological components, and you're inoculating children with the equivalent of about 160 immunological components. It is not just figuratively a drop in the ocean of what children encounter and manage every day. It's literally a drop in the ocean. I mean, you are confronted with bacteria in the dust that you inhale, the water that you drink, the food that you eat. None of that is sterile. And you make an immune response to make sure that those bacteria don't invade. So that's number one. Your second question, it's a reasonable question. These are all reasonable questions. How about the site? I mean, we inhale things, we ingest things, but we don't inject things. So is it fair to say then that when you inject these bacterial proteins or bacterial polysaccharides or viral proteins, that you're doing something unnatural? And the answer to that question is no, because we scrape our skin all the time. We inject things inadvertently under our skin all the time. When you brush your teeth or you have a bowel movement, by doing that, you cause bacteria to enter your bloodstream. We have bacteria in our bloodstream, or said another way, bacteremia, all the time. We handle it because we're immune competent. So you're always confronting that, and so therefore you have these so-called lymph nodes. You have them under your arm. You have them in your elbow. You have them in your neck. You have them everywhere in your body because your body is ready for whenever it sees any of these viruses or bacteria to confront them at any site. Your third question, and it's a question that was actually raised in the early 1980s, was about sudden infant death syndrome. In the early 1980s was born the hypothesis or born the notion that the pertussis vaccine, which was then the whooping cough vaccine, the whole cell pertussis vaccine, which was used then and was much more reactogenic, if you will, had a much worse side effect profile than the current vaccine we use, the so-called acellular pertussis vaccine, that could cause sudden infant death syndrome because, parents saw that, right? My child was fine. They got a pertussis vaccine, and then they died, 24 hours, 36 hours later. Could the vaccine have done it? Again, there's probably 25 studies that have looked at this question. And again, I'm happy to send them to you. Trying to ask the question, are you at greater risk of sudden infant death syndrome if you got that vaccine than if you didn't? And the answer was no. The problem with sudden infant death syndrome, and it took a long time for people to figure this out, and this sort of gets to your other earlier point, which is when do we make mistakes? We make mistakes. And this SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, is a perfect example. When I was training as a resident, I was taught as a pediatrician in the late 1970s that after a child eats, what you should do is lie them on their stomach. Because that way, if they vomit, they won't aspirate it, meaning inhale the vomitus back into their trachea or windpipe and then into their lungs. That was bad advice. That was really bad advice because that increased the incidence of sudden infant death syndrome. It wasn't until the early 1990s that we realized that children are much better off on their back because when they're on their front, what happens is sometimes the level of carbon dioxide increases in their blood. They don't recognize it because they're still too immature, and that caused sudden infant death syndrome. By lying children on their back, the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, had a program called the Back to Sleep program, meaning put children on their back. That dramatically decreased the incidence of SIDS in the 1990s. But for 20-plus years, pediatricians were giving awful advice about what to do after a child eats. So it gets to your point. I mean, do we know everything? No. Do we give bad advice occasionally? Yes. I mean, hopefully we learn as we go, and unfortunately, children and parents do have to pay a price for that because we learn as we go, and that's invariant. We always have to learn as we go. We never know everything.
I agree to the learning as we go thing. I think I just agree more to it if people who were a part of it were more like, I guess, people expect it to be. I think a lot of people really do think that these random people just say, ooh, I volunteer to be a part of this study, and it's placebo, like saline water pretty much versus whatever the vaccine is, and that's how you think it goes down, and you think that all the ingredients would be maybe some of the virus, a little adjuvant, and some saline or something. That's how your brain is trained to look at this if you don't know, if you haven't read anything. But then you start really looking into it and you start digging into it and you realize that all of these ingredients potentially have, like formaldehyde, like polysorbate 80. I know polysorbate 80 is like the way aluminum can piggyback through the blood-brain barrier. And I'm still curious about that even being used, like it's used in bath products and things like that. And it kind of blows my mind that it's just so used willy-nilly. And people don't really know the repercussions of that either. But there's just so many ingredients, so many things that, and I've heard a lot of people say the dose makes the poison, but a poison is a poison is a poison. I mean, that is just the way that this is, and who's to say how much one individual can handle versus another? It seems like the dose doesn't really differ from a 5-month-old to a 200-pound man for a lot of these vaccinations. And that seems pretty crazy as well. I think, even in veterinary stuff, it seems a lot more done by body weight and what that size of the animal could handle. So it seems odd that for human beings, it seems like the dose is the same pretty much for most of the vaccines. When it could be a 10-pound infant or, like I said, a 200-pound man, and the dose would be the same. And that seems kind of odd too, that would be the case. It would seem that would seem to need to vary if you were one who wanted to choose that. Do you believe that when and that was just my little spiel. Do you believe that when you go into a doctor's office, they should look over the insert with you? Because I know that for myself, I have 5 kids. I've never had a doctor do that with me until I asked them that question. And they really weren't that gracious to want to do that with me when I wanted that. Like, I just wanted to know what was in it because I have latex allergies. And so I wanted to know if that was something that was in, the vaccine or in, anything to do with the syringe or anything. And they didn't want me to, they didn't want to give it to me at first. And then when they finally did, they told me, no, it wasn't anything to do with it. And then by page 2, it had latex listed as part of, something with it. So for me, luckily, I was able to read it for myself and see that it was there. But do you... it's so hard for me to get all my thoughts like organized in my brain to get them out, but you know how that goes sometimes. I guess my brain's just very full. I'm going to switch gears real quick because I just had someone's question pop in my head. Lynette, can
I just answer your question? Because you, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think if you have a latex allergy, I mean, certainly there are certain vaccines which have, rubber stoppers that contain latex, and so that would put you at risk. So that you're absolutely right. In terms of doctors, say, going over each of the different components in vaccines, that's fair. It has to be done in context, though. I mean, so you mentioned formaldehyde, which is an agent that's used to inactivate certain whole-killed, say, viral vaccines, or even the pertussis vaccine, so like the polio vaccine is inactivated with formaldehyde. So should you know then? Would it be reasonable then for you to be informed that there is a certain amount of formaldehyde in the polio vaccine, in the inactivated polio vaccine? It's fine, except realize that formaldehyde is a product of single carbon metabolism. We have been making formaldehyde in our bodies ever since we crawled out of ocean onto land, assuming we all believe in evolution, and that for that reason, then, you have logarithmically greater quantities of formaldehyde in your body than you're ever going to get from vaccines. I mean, formaldehyde is a natural product. So as long as it's put in that context, sure. I just don't think people are quick to put it in that context. It also asks a lot for the doctor to go through each of those components and put it in context. And so I'm sympathetic to that. But I see your general point. I think ingredients, chemicals sound scary, right? I mean, if you instead of saying what do you say dihydroxymonoxide, it sounds scarier.
Would the formaldehyde that you would receive in a vaccine be the same exact formaldehyde that your body is creating? Do you understand what I'm asking? And levels.
It's the exact. No, it's less. It's much less than what you have in your body. And formaldehyde's formaldehyde. It's the exact same chemical.
Yeah. Well, it's smelly. Sorry. I make people laugh. I can't help myself. I'm a goofball. This is the most normal and calm I have been for a show. I'll just have you know that. So usually I'm kind of a goofball because I have a sense of humor. I could tell from your book you do too. Which, is always nice because the world is way too serious a lot of times, and it's just nice to laugh sometimes instead of cry. So
I'm with you.
So I wanted to jump and ask you this. I know a lot of people who are listening probably were people who went to ACIP, and I know a lot more will be there. Sorry, Paul, but there's going to be a lot more following me there this time too. But you were nice enough to come and have lunch, and I missed the beginning of that. I had stayed back and put out JB's book to the rest of the room that I could afford to hand out as many as I could. And by the time I caught up, you guys maybe had like 5 minutes left, and I was kind of off to the back. So I didn't get to really hear a lot. All I got was whatever kind of was passed to me in hearsay afterwards. I know that everybody said they got a chance to go around the table and tell you who they were, how they ended up, connected to the movement, whatever their injury story was, whatever the case may have been. And then I guess they were able to ask you a few questions. So I missed all of this. Like I said, I just walked up right at the end where everybody was kind of finishing up because I was busy. And so what the question was I was asked is, And you already know it's coming, so I'm going to have to ask it. Because you answered this to me through email, so I know the answer to this already. But for everybody else, why did you make the gun gesture to your head during the comment portion when one of the concerned parents was speaking in October? And like I said, I know you told me the answer to this, but for the listeners who don't know, they would like to know why that happened. So I'm going to give you a chance to explain that one.
So I was asked by, I forget the name of the one, I think she was from Connecticut, who asked me, Leanne, who asked me, would I please come to dinner with this group, that they were concerned parents, and that were I a reasonable person, that I should listen to them. I should at least listen to them. Fair enough. I think it was a fair question. So I went to lunch, as you said, at that sandwich place. Then we come back, and the first two parents who got up at the microphone misquoted me. The first one took something completely out of context, which was, that I said that basically you should lie about whether or not MMR causes autism, which wasn't what I said. I mean, what I said was, and this was previously, she took something out of context. It was about whether, what I said was that you can never really prove the way that science works is you formulate a null hypothesis, MMR doesn't cause autism. You can never accept a null hypothesis, which is to say you can never prove never. You can't ever say MMR doesn't cause autism, but I said when you speak to the public, they don't hear it that way. So they don't understand necessarily the tenets of the scientific method. So you have to be more reasonable. I mean, I can't say I can't flap my arms and fly by the scientific method, but I can't flap my arms and fly. So I think it's okay for me to say I can't fly, at least without an airplane, and the same thing's true. She sort of took that out of context. What really upset me was the second person who got up, who then said that I said that the vaccine schedule should somehow be changed. And I looked at Amy Middleman, who was sitting across the room from me, and she looks at me like, you said it should be changed? And, I just put a gun to my head like, why did I do this? Why did I go to lunch when people are just going to get up and misquote me? Why did I do that? It's like, shoot me, shoot me, take me, because that's all that meant. Obviously, people were interpreted it much more negatively than that, but that's all that meant. It's like, God, why did I do this? They're just going to get up and misquote me, because that's what that was. It's like I just put myself in a position where I could then be, and people are perfectly willing to get up and just vilify me in front of my colleagues, and it's just shoot me. That's what that was. Sorry.
Well,
I'm a little
I guess
bit of a
I can get it
goofball
from.
too.
I can get it from.
That's part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get it from both sides of that one, and then that's why I wanted to ask you that question on air. I was there. I was at the meeting, so I felt like I could ask you that question, and I was, like I said, I had to miss most of the lunch. I just caught that last little bit. Now, it is kind of hard when, for me, the way that I saw this, and everybody knows me, they know I try to lead with love, they know I try to have an open heart, and the way that I kind of saw it was like a slap. And I'm on, it's hard for me because, of course, these are my people. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it was like, okay, I wasn't even there for the agreement of lunch. I just know that it happened because I witnessed the end. And in my head, it was like, wow, this is a big step. This is a good thing. Don't anybody do anything to jack this up. And so, I mean, that's how I felt about it. So when the comments were happening, for me, it was hard because I thought, and for mothers, I get that side. Like, you come in there. I mean, you were part of my quote the one time I spoke there. For mothers, that's why I asked you about the state thing. Because for mothers, when we come in there, this is a healing process for us, too. As hard as it is, I mean, it's like David versus Goliath walking in there for us. And I don't know that you guys really realize how it feels for us to be in there. When I first started coming, I didn't see you, and, a lot of the other warriors who were coming weren't coming. I felt like I stood out like a sore thumb in that room, and, I mean, I do anyway. But, but, I mean, it was so hard to see the way that things are happening and how there really isn't a lot of stuff. I remember I told everybody after the last ASIP, Paul, if we had been taking a shot every time the word assume was used in that room, we would have all left ASIP slap-ass drunk. That's not okay. That's not normal when you're talking about facts, supposedly, and data.
Well, let me say this, Lynette. It's when I was asked to go to lunch, I trusted the two women who asked me to do it. I trusted them. I trusted them to to be honest with me, that they were they were going to tell me what they thought, and that I would listen and tell them what I thought. And then to have someone come up and essentially the first person take me out of context, and the second person just absolutely misrepresent completely anything. I didn't say that at all. It's like I just felt like that trust was violated, and it made me feel terrible. It's like sort of no good deed goes unpunished, and that's why the sort of gun to the head. I mean, just shoot me for choosing to trust that. I mean, the first time you are, I guess, burned when you trust somebody, it's like shame on them. The second time, it's shame on me. I mean, the first person who came up to me, to be perfectly honest, I think her name was either Luann or Leanne. She seemed like a perfectly reasonable person, a nice person like you, and I thought, okay, I mean, we're all on the same side here. We're all trying to do what's best for children. I mean, we may interpret data differently, but we're all on the same side. And when I'm treated as if I'm an enemy, as if I'm a bad guy, I just feel like the trust is violated. But that said, I just like to say I still agreed to come on your show because I trust you. I think you said to me that you would ask questions and it was just going to be you and it wasn't going to be a call-in show. I trusted that was true. I can tell you there were a lot of people who have said to me, "What are you doing going on that show?" But I trust you. I basically am inherently trusting, and sometimes when you trust people, you get burned, and it upsets me when I get burned because I don't think it's fair.
Well, I'm the same way, and I've said the same thing. And I've had people who have done my show who were really bigger people in this movement who have said, I walked away from that show not remembering something from my story or Lynette's story or whatever, but Lynette talking about Offit and talking about being kind to people and not, treating people in a bad way and how that can lead to change. And I think about the civil rights movement. And you want to know something? I've told everybody no calls, and they know that. And I'll tell you this, my dashboard is lit up like Christmas lights, but I mean, that's okay. They can sit there and they can do whatever they're doing. This is my show. I run my stuff. So I'm not worried about everybody else. I'm asking what questions I see that I feel like deserve merit and deserve to be asked, or that I can find out of all these lists and papers and stacks of things I've been sent since the start of this. But for me, it's like, I'm really just trying to have that conversation, just trying to show people this is a possibility and that we can respect each other and we can disagree. And for me, I'm on the side of humanity. I'm on the side of making sure that if people do choose this choice, that they do so fully informed. And then that is their choice to make. But I wasn't fully informed, and my family did pay consequence, and it's sad, but that's just the way it worked out. And there are a lot of other parents out here like me who are fighting this because their heart is in it, because they watched something happen, because, if you just, I don't know, man, when things happen before your eyes, it's really hard to deny them. So I want to ask you this. Do you have, I know out of all the years you've been a doctor and a pediatrician, you must have seen vaccine injury, even if you do view it as something rare. What vaccine injury story have you seen that really stood out to you in your mind?
When I was a fellow here at Children's Hospital Philadelphia in the early 1980s, I saw a child who got polio from the polio vaccine. And it actually it affected him to the point that he was paralyzed, and it really affected me. Because I knew that there was another vaccine out there, even though we didn't have it available in this country at the time, and so it sort of shook my faith at some level, that we would still be giving a vaccine that caused harm, that knowingly caused harm. I mean, we knew that when the Sabin vaccine was first licensed, which was as a series of 3 different strains between 1961 and 1963, I mean, very quickly there were data coming out of Russia and other places that this vaccine had the unique capacity to actually revert to what immunologists and virologists would call neurovirulent virus or wild-type virus. I mean, it essentially caused polio. I mean, that, even though it was extremely rare, the fact is we had another alternative, the inactivated vaccine, and that really, really upset me. And when I was finally asked to be, first of all, I wrote a book about it. I mean, and I wrote a book called The Cutter Incident, and what I talk at some length about that. And I saw myself, I know this is not going to be what you would, I see myself as a vaccine safety activist. I mean, I asked to be on the polio working group so I could make that change, and it was a fight to move to finally the inactivated vaccine. But there was a lot of pushback on that because it was much more expensive. But there was no price. You can't do these sort of cost benefit analyses. That was just bullshit to me. If a child is suffering needlessly because of that vaccine, I don't care what the cost is. If there's another vaccine that is safe. So was I allowed to say that word on the radio? I can't remember.
Yes, this is Freedomizer, man.
Oh, good.
I've said worse, I promise. I get on a roll sometimes and they say I sound like a Southern Baptist preacher. Sometimes I just can't help it. Sometimes the spirit just gets you. So let's see here. What else have we got from our parents here? We've just so many questions have come in. It's so hard for me to. It's like my brain. If you only saw how many questions are blowing in through the live feed, much less the stuff that's already in front of me from the last few months. It's very hard for my brain to situate.
Here's my deal in that. When this is over, all I ask you, and I will read J.B. Hamley's book in exchange for this. Realize we're on the same side. We are on the same side. We are. We both want the same thing. Everything you said you want is what I want. The only difference is how we interpret data. But we both want the same thing, which is children to be safe as possible.
I hope that we'll get to have, and I hope we'll get to have more conversations like this in the future. And so I want to ask you about the Zimmerman deposition or files. I want to ask you about that. We'll get to that in a second. And that's something that my page is blowing up so much with that I can't even see. But people know what they want to hear about, and so I want to talk to you about that. Have you dived into that? Have you read anything? Have you read that? It's about, I guess, 31 pages or so.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read specifically that deposition. So no, I mean I know the basic thinking, which is that there are certain children who have a genetic predisposition that when they get a vaccine would be more predisposed to getting autism. But again, what I would say there is what happens in court is irrelevant. Courts aren't a place to determine scientific truths. Courts are a place to settle disputes. So I think that if data emerge that children who have certain genetic disorders are at increased risk of autism, then I think that we'll know. But for right now, to be perfectly honest, the way I see this, I think you're born with autism, and so I think that what's known. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, as a piggyback to that, do you find it as a coincidence? Then I believe from what I've read lately, it's 98% of people with autism have the MTHFR gene mutation, mitochondrial disorder, all these different things going on with their body. So, I mean, really and truly, it would seem that if this is the case, it would be almost criminal not to test people, pre-test it. I mean, people for these kind of things before they're vaccinated. And I understand, vaccines are even given on the first day of life. I definitely don't agree with that for many, many reasons. And, we don't have to get in a whole Hep B debate here, but, I've just read too much science on that to understand it being given to a newborn baby for any reason other than the mother being positive with Hep B. That's about the only way I could understand it in any way, shape, or form. But I don't want to jump all through that. I still want to hang out here with the Zimmerman deposition for a minute. Well, if you have not read it, I have read it in full. I actually have it sitting in my hands right now. I guess the joys of being me, I get sent a lot of interesting things. But you definitely need to. You need to read this and understand what they were saying. And I get your you're saying that. It's a court saying, and maybe you don't see it as scientific, but the people who were this was science just being delivered in a courtroom, and
the courts don't determine scientific truths. I mean, let's say here's what I would say: if this mutation is common, then it's not hard actually, because there are about 1 to 2% of parents choose not to vaccinate their children at all. You can retrospectively look at parents who have made that choice, and as compared to parents who get vaccines according to the routine schedule, and look at the genetic background of those two groups to see whether or not who do have that mutation, that they are at an increased risk of developmental delays. I mean, it's not if doctors have that hypothesis, that notion that thing is true, it's not that hard to prove it. So prove it. Giving depositions in court isn't a proof. Believing it's true isn't a proof. Seeing it, saying I saw a child where they had this mutation and this happened to them, that's not a proof. It's not that hard. The way to prove these things, Lynette, is by so-called epidemiological studies, the same way you prove that cigarette smoking caused lung cancer. You just look at groups of children who did or didn't get a vaccine, retrospectively, obviously. You can't do it prospectively, but you can do it retrospectively and see whether it's... So, for example, the baby SIB study, I think, is an interesting study, right? It was done by Jain, Jain was the researcher's last name. And what he did was he looked retrospectively at children who where the first child was autistic, and had autism. The second child either was or was not given vaccines, to see whether there was any difference. Now, you would argue that if autism has strictly a genetic basis, that second child would be more likely to develop autism because there's autism in the family than in a group where the first child didn't have autism. So the baby SIB study, right, has children the first child has autism, either did or didn't get vaccines, and there was no difference in outcomes. You were no more likely to develop autism if you'd gotten the vaccines or if you hadn't gotten vaccines. So I think those are the kinds of studies I'm talking about. If there are excellent studies that are done by people like Dr. Zimmerman or others that prove his point, great. But until then, it's just a guy with an opinion. And until that changes, I think that we are where we are, which is that the best data are on the side of vaccines don't cause autism to date.
I don't know. We've still got a long way to go on that one. I definitely wouldn't say the science is settled. I saw that in your book, and it made me have a tear come out of my eyeball because it was just one of those things that's like, I don't know. As somebody, and I got to say, seeing your material, I've heard you, I've listened to many things where you spoke, read many of your blogs, your articles, things of that nature. And obviously you're an educated person. There's no denying that. It is obvious. So, for me, it's hard because I feel like I am just this mom, and I have found so many things just on my own, being able to read any book I can find. I've read huge, even just Merrick handbooks. I've read anything and everything you could probably imagine at this point that I could get my hands on either side of this, to figure out what's going on out there. And then I talk to all these people, and it's not like hundreds, it's not like a couple. It's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And it's just mind-blowing because it's like, how many people, for you, I want to know this answer. How many people for you with the same story before, does it take millions and millions of people would have to come together and say this is what happened and this is, the regression my child went through, or this is how, and I want to say this too, some children are born with autism, and there are genetic forms, I believe, and you actually do see different gene mutations in those children. But for children who were affected by vaccination who have autism, like my daughter, I was pregnant when I got that vaccine, 26 weeks, and I'm telling you, she was born with it. Yes, she was, because I feel like that chemical assault happened while she was in my womb. And, they used to have running jokes back in the day. I don't know if you know this, Paul, but they have running jokes. If you want to detox a woman, get her pregnant, all the bad juju in her goes to the baby. And, that ran with, a joke with minors, but all different kinds of, things where you would be, a toxic, have a toxic body or whatever. But... there's not, to me, it's not really, the science is settled. And I think that I hope that if you leave, talking to me with anything, it's an open mind of, reading more on both sides and understanding more from both sides and just being more open-minded to science from every direction, because it will help broaden your horizon of how you see things. And you are someone in a position of power. You are someone that a lot of people turn to and listen to for their health information, for their information on vaccines especially. And so, I feel like you don't only owe it to yourself, but you owe it to all of those people to see every angle and every bit of it and every study that you can get your hands on if possible. I get being busy, believe me, I get it. I've got 2 little girls who have, issues on top of a whole life I'm trying to run here on my own. I definitely get being busy. But I don't know. I see,
Still
you
there,
don't come
Lynette?
at this. You have not, yeah. Can you hear me?
Lynette?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I lost you for a second there.
Okay.
I can hear
you
you
have
now.
not been rude to me. Okay, you have not been rude to me. You have not been cold to me in any way, shape, or form because I have tried not to treat you that way. I know that from what I've heard about you, you're not a very religious person. I don't know that for a fact, but for me, I do, believe that we treat people the way we want to be treated, and thus far, you and I have been able to actually show that. And that's nice because we need more conversations like this. We need more people speaking out and being able to conversate. I will have to ask you this. This is not a question from me. Of course, you'll be able to tell by the question. But they do want to know if you would ever be willing to do the High Wire or to have a live debate with the High Wire team or Dell or any of them. That was a question I was asked to ask you by not only them, but many of their followers and friends and people like that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Here's what I would say. I would say that if people like Del Bigtree or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Or J.B. Hanley can show studies that clearly make their point, I would be more than happy to read them. I mean, I'm the co-editor of the book Plotkin's Vaccines, which is 1,600 pages long with 20,000 references. I read a lot of studies about vaccines, so I'm more than happy to do that. But I think a debate is to me that's not as valuable. But can I say one thing in reference to what you said before? You mentioned the fact that many parents believe that or feel that this is true, that their child was fine, that they got a vaccine or vaccines, and because of that, their child is now has autism. That's not hard to find if that's true. I mean, so for example, in 1976, there was a vaccine that was given in this country to prevent swine flu that was found to be a rare cause of something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is this ascending paralysis that can occasionally be fatal. There were of the 40 million doses that were administered, there were about 400 cases. So roughly 1 per 100,000. Every year in this country, 200,000 children are diagnosed with autism. 200,000. If we can detect in retrospective, meaning backward-looking epidemiological studies, an event that occurs in 1 in 100,000 people, that means that given of those 200,000 people who are children who are diagnosed with autism every year, if 2 of those cases were associated with vaccines, which is to say 2 per 200,000 or 1 per 100,000, that should be detectable, easily detectable in a retrospective analysis. It hasn't been. Now, the question is why. It hasn't been when we looked at whether or not MMR causes autism. It hasn't been whether we looked at thimerosal, this ethyl mercury-containing preservative in vaccines, causes autism. Why? I would argue the reason is because it's not there to be found. But what I feel sometimes some people argue, because they feel passionately about this, strongly about this, is that it's not being found because there's a cover-up, because there's evil people who mean to do children harm. And that's just not true. I don't see those people. I mean, all the people I deal with at the ACIP, and I would think that now that you've been there a few times, you would see this too. Those people care. They're trying to get it right. They're trying to do the right thing. I mean, they may not always get it right. They may not always end up doing the right thing, but they're certainly trying to do that, which gets back to my point of I think we're all on the same side in this. I really do. And although you're right, although I was raised to be very religious, I'm not particularly religious. And I wrote a book called Bad Faith When Religious Belief Undermines Modern Medicine. And I thought when I wrote that book, it was going to sort of be a diatribe against religion, but it wasn't at all, because I read the New Testament for a long reason that I'll tell you about when I see you at the ACIP. And I became actually much more religious when I read that book. I like the tenets of religion. I do. I mean, I like it that it teaches you to be moral, that it teaches you to love, that it teaches you to turn the other cheek and to care, that it teaches you to love your children. I love all that. Where I get sort of hung up is in the practice of religion. I think that a lot of things are done in the name of religion that are just homophobic and misogynistic and evil in many ways. And so I got turned off a little more to the practice and the actual concept of religion, but just so we make that clear.
Yeah, I grew up kind of forced religion. So for me, Southern Baptist is the way I grew up. And, I stayed in trouble a lot, too, because the pastor of the church I grew up in was also the administrator of the group home I grew up in. So it was a rough life. Religion was, but it was something that it got me through, and it's something that still carries me through. It's God really has changed my life, and it's definitely taught me to love my enemy, to bless those who curse you, I think that the only way to really make a difference is to try to see each other's point of view. And if you can't agree, then at some point you have to go, okay, how do we do what's best for everybody, and not always, I don't know, for me it's just the anti and the pro. I'm allergic to latex. I'm not anti-latex. I'm allergic to it. There's just certain things that happen, and they happen to certain people, and so you got to do proper, recourse to make sure it doesn't happen to you again. I don't think that should be a reason why people should be downed or made fun of or called a certain thing. Like, I don't associate with anti-vaxxer. I really don't. I actually find that to be kind of a hurtful term. For me personally, if anything, ex-vaxxer, but that still kind of sounds weird. I just feel like I am an advocate for truth and honestly just health freedom in general. I don't think it's right for kids whose parents maybe want to try something different with their children, that they get forced chemo. I don't think anything mandated on a family when it comes to their own children that they have created is proper. Unless those people are really seriously out of their minds, and I hope that anybody who's known me or listened to me after this amount of time would know I am not out of my mind. Really and truly, though, at some point you've got to assume that these parents have been with this child since its first breath and they know what's best. And I feel like a lot of people just get involved and they feel like credentials or whatever they think, kind of trumps a parent's, intuition and what they do know as a parent. I hope that more people will also, from your side, look at this and take that away, that we don't think we're doctors. I don't think I'm a doctor. I don't think I credential-wise, there's no letters next to my name except for MOM. But I hold that with major pride, and I just, same as you hold every bit of what you've got going on. And I have to do what's best for mine, just like you are charged with doing what's best for a much larger group of people. And I've just kind of taken that on my own accord. But you,
no, and
I hope that
and I take my I have two children too. I think of the population at large in the same way I think about my children. If I would do it for my children, then I think it's reasonable to argue to do it for other people's children. Would I do this for my children, who I obviously want to keep in the safest, best position possible? So I love them.
Right, but you also still want choice to do for your children, I would think. As a man, especially, like, I know how testosterone works. Men don't like to be told what to do. I'm just saying that, I've seen it. I see how this stuff goes.
But what happens when you get older, Lynette, your testosterone level declines. So, we're much more malleable when we're older.
Well, either way, it would seem, though, being told what you have to do on any level would be a hard thing. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of rebellious, if people can't tell by looking at me. But, I kind of feel like it's, I can't even stand to be told simple things I can or can't do, much less like a mandated, like something being poked into me or my family member. I don't know. I know you have children. I believe you have a son and a daughter. You wouldn't want someone to force you to do anything to yours either. You get what I'm saying? Like, how are you on mandates, but how do you see that?
So the question is where you draw the line. So for example, I live in Philadelphia where there's two very large faith healing communities. So when their children have bacterial pneumonia, should they be forced to treat them with antibiotics? I think the answer to that question is yes. They should. They shouldn't be allowed to martyr their child to their religion. If their child has diabetes, type 1 diabetes, should they be forced to give their children life-saving insulin? I think the answer to that question is yes. I do. I don't think that, again, their children should be martyred to their religion. So then it gets a little trickier. How about chemotherapy? If it's a kind of chemotherapy that is clearly treatable, like for acute lymphocytic leukemia, though you can talk about cures with that kind of disease. Should they be forced to save their child's life with chemotherapy? Yes, I think they should. So now you get to vaccines. Vaccines are obviously very different. Vaccines are not a treatment; they're a preventive, and the odds are you're not going to get that disease. That's the odds. So the odds are, even if you choose not to vaccinate, you're probably not going to have to suffer. Now you increase your risk. You definitely increase your risk. And so to me, it's a lot murkier. And the other thing that complicates that is that there are people who can't be vaccinated. So they depend on those around them to protect them. Actually, I was asked by Dan Diamond at Politico, what's the worst thing that some people who are, and I'm not saying that you, but people who are anti-vaccine say. And to me, it's, what do you care what I do? You've vaccinated your children. Well, that assumes vaccines are 100% effective, which they're not. I mean, the best of vaccines, something like the measles vaccine, is about 95% effective, but that means one of every 20 children is not going to be protected. And some children can't be vaccinated. Do you have, as a societal member, do you have a responsibility to those children? I think you do, and this is where it gets tricky. I don't know the answer to this question. I don't. I think it's tricky. So I understand, where people are coming from.
Yeah, this is where a lot of people say, do I set my child on fire to keep the entire rest of the tribe warm? Or, is the risk worth the benefit? And I think a lot of people are seeing now, especially looking at a lot of studies, that a lot more chronic illness is happening in America. Like, you can't deny that that is being seen in our children all the way up through our elderly. Like, the chronic illness level has gone up, skyrocketed, on many levels. And I've got a lot of health issues going on, and I hope I get to stay on this planet for a long time to come. My doctor doesn't think so, but we'll see what happens. We're all out here just fighting our own battles and our own struggles and hoping we get to survive. And for me, I want to see change come. That's what I hope to live to see. I don't know if I'm going to make it that long, but we've got people out here who have been fighting 20, 30 years with children who literally they got vaccinated and they watched change. And I can't say that's not what happened to my daughter because, like I said, it happened, when I was pregnant. So I can't say that I saw the same thing in my own household, but I've talked to so many of these parents, and I've talked to so many of these, even the doctors who have, witnessed these kinds of things in their practices over and over again. And, it's one of those things where I hope, if the proper information is put in front of you, that you will look at it and you will, really look at the way things are going out here, and the amount of injury that is happening is not the small amount that's being reported. And a lot of doctors really don't even know VAERS exists. They don't know ASIP is happening. My general practitioner is 64 years old, and he had no idea what ASIP was. And now he watches because I told him to. I mean, it's funny to think about it, like they had no idea. And it's sad because you think these are the things that these people are supposed to be paying attention to get their information from. And why do I as a parent know this exists, but you as a physician don't? So we need a lot more awareness from you guys' side that, all these things are happening as well. Like, I don't understand how come doctors aren't even trained to see vaccine injury when, even if y'all believe it's rare, y'all do understand that it happens, and that doctors should be trained to see it so that when it happens, parents don't feel like they're laughed out of the room, and they do get some kind of help because they were willing to take the vaccine without even fully knowing the full risk. And, do you get what I'm saying from my side of this fence?
Yeah, no, I think where we agree is that we both agree that vaccines can cause harm. I just went through what the oral polio vaccine could do, what the yellow fever vaccine could do. That gelatin-containing vaccines can cause a rare hypersensitivity reaction. So that's not a disagreement. The disagreement is where we differ is which harms. I mean, you I think ascribe certain harms, chronic disorders like autism, attention deficit disorder, multiple sclerosis, et cetera, as being things that for which I don't think there's evidence. If you're asking me, would I be willing to look at papers, or studies that that are internally consistent and robust and, more importantly, reproducible to see whether or not certain harms occur? Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely think that's true. With the rotavirus vaccine, for example, when RotaShield was first put on the market in 1998, I was actually on the ACIP. I mean, I didn't think I was surprised that vaccine could cause this intestinal blockage and deception, because I didn't think natural infection did that. So it's hard for me to believe that a weakened form of the virus would cause something that the natural form didn't, because the natural form obviously reproduced itself in the intestine far more vigorously than did the weakened form. But what ended up happening, so I was wrong. I mean, over time, what I learned was that yes, the vaccine could do it, but yes, the natural infection could also do it. And on balance, it seems to be a wash. But I mean, so we certainly learn as we go. I'm open-minded to the fact that I can be wrong on things, but again, I just think that things that occur in court or things that occur because people feel things strongly are not proofs. I think proofs are proofs, and we'll see. I'm certainly open-minded to it, and hopefully you and I can still go to lunch at some point in the future next time when you're not handing out books. So I think we agree more than you think. We both want the same thing. That's not our problem. And as long as we want the same thing, I think good things will happen.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, truthfully, I really do just want to see. Honestly, here's my fight. Really is choice. It really is. As long as I'm not out there, and I'm not like, I don't think anybody should have vaccines. I don't think anybody should be able to do that. If they want to do that, that's their choice. I really am coming from a point of you need to understand every risk involved. And a lot of the things that are happening to people out here are listed on the inserts, and then they're still laughed off and told it's not what happened to them. And I think that's the part where the disconnect is happening, where doctors could become more informed of what these injuries are and what they look like, so that when the parents do come to them for help, they can receive help.
Yeah, package inserts can be a little cannot be your best source of information. They tend to be more of a legal communication document than a medical communication document. So, for example, if a side effect has been reported within 42 days of any dose of a vaccine, it'll end up in the package insert, even if it occurs at the same level in those who receive placebo. Even if it doesn't make any biological sense that it would do it, it still can end up in the package insert. I mean, an early chickenpox or varicella vaccine package insert contained deaths following that vaccine, when some of those deaths were explained by like car accidents and falling out of buildings. It's just it's not the better source of information is studies, either retrospectively or prospectively at children who are vaccinated or not vaccinated. That's the better way to determine whether there are side effects. I mean, if someone reports that autism has been reported within 42 days of a dose of Tdap, that could end up in the package insert, even though obviously it's not causally associated, it's just temporally associated. So package inserts are not a great source of information. The studies are the better source. So look at the studies.
All right. And I was going to ask you, too, do you mind for emailing me or even sending me? I don't care how you get it to me, but I was wondering if you could send me the data where it shows that they do test the schedule the way it's given, because that is something I get asked all the time by so many parents is, where is the test? Where are these studies showing these vaccines tested the way that they're given in the schedule in a pediatrician's office around our country every single day of the week?
Right. So good question. So here's the way that works. I mean, I know this in part because I was fortunate enough, as I said earlier, to be part of a team here at Children's Hospital Philadelphia that created the bovine human reassortant vaccine Rototec. So I watched the way that vaccine got developed. You can't put a vaccine onto this existing schedule until you prove that your vaccine does not interfere with the immune response of the vaccines that are going to be given at the same time. And conversely, that those vaccines that are giving at the same time don't interfere with your immune response. Those papers aren't always published is the problem, although the data are always generated, and the FDA has those data. So a number of those papers are published. So I mean, I'm happy to send you at least the ones. There's probably hundreds of such studies, not all of which get published, although all get submitted to the FDA, because the FDA is not going to license any vaccine unless you have shown that you don't interfere with the safety or immunogenicity profile of existing vaccines, and those vaccines don't interfere with your safety and immunogenicity profile. Nothing gets onto the schedule without that. So it does exist. So yes, I mean, I can. You know what I'm going to do, Lynette? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send me your best address, and I'm going to send you a copy of the vaccines book, which is like 1,600 pages long, has 20,000 references. Any question that you have is likely to be in there. It's a few $100 book, but it's my treat, and I'm going to send you that. Just send me the best address, and I'll send it to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I'll definitely read it. Everybody knows that about me. I love reading. I spend just about every night before I go to bed. My daughter laughs because she's 19 and she'll come in and I'll be half asleep. She'll say, every time I come in, your head's slumped and a book's in your hand. It's like, I can't help it. But that is how we learn. That is how we keep going forward and evolving as a species, is to actually put knowledge in our minds. And so that is something I'm always trying to do. And I really do appreciate you talking to me today, and I hope we can do this again in the future. I look forward to seeing you next month, and definitely love to have lunch and be able to talk more. And honestly, I don't know if you plan on doing the high wire or any of those things in the future, but if you ever need a moderator, you've got me. And I'm good at keeping some peace, as you can see. I don't like the hype. I don't like drama. I just feel like it's unnecessary if we ever want to get somewhere. I do appreciate you talking to me, and I've got probably a billion more questions that I didn't get to ask you, but luckily I know how to get in touch with you. And I hope we can keep this line of communication open for a long time to come. And like I said, maybe we can do this again in the future. And just thank you for doing that. And I know it's not easy, and I know a lot of times things get taken out of context, things get twisted, things get changed, and it is hard. But just I'm trying to look at every avenue of this, and I appreciate you saying you'll read JB's book, and I appreciate you offering and being willing to help me see things, also, because this is the way that things happen. This is the way communication works. And, we may see things completely differently, but at least we're looking, and that is what really matters here. When you shut doors and you say this can no longer be talked about, I can't talk about this, I can't, this is where problems come in, and it becomes it's too much of a fight, and it shouldn't be. People should be able to communicate. And I do think you and I just proved that our two sides can have a conversation and even disagree on many points and still be able to talk with a cool, calm head. And I appreciate that. And I hope it's an example to more on both sides. But I know my side, I get frustrated because we all represent each other. All y'all out there hear me say this every week. Remember that. We all represent each other. When you get out here acting a fool, you make us look silly. And I don't like being represented that way. So don't represent me that way. Don't represent others that way. Treat each other with love and respect and kindness. And be open-minded. And just find the facts. Learn everything. Or read as much as you can. It doesn't matter. Read everything and anything. That is how you learn. Anyway, Paul, thank you so much. I'll be emailing you, and like I said, I've probably got a million questions that I didn't get to, but hopefully there's another day that we will be able to do this again. And like I said, thank you for doing it. And tell your side. I know you say we're on the same side. I'm still trying to work on that one in my brain, but I'm on the humanity side, so I get that part of it. But let your side know, not all of my side is horrible. Like, we really, there are, crazies on every angle of this. There really are. In any movement, in anything in life, there are crazy people everywhere. And I probably look like one of the craziest ones, but I am a bit more of sound mind, I do believe, or try to be. And, so just everybody quit judging each other, and everybody just treat each other the way you want to be treated. And who knows where it'll take us? Who knows where it'll lead?
Well,
anyway,
thanks for talking to me,
Paul.
Lynette. And safe travels, and I'll see you in a month.
All right, man. I will see you next month. Thank you. Have a great
Take
day.
Care. You too. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. So I know that didn't go the way everybody else wishes it did. That went the way that my heart told me to take it. If y'all could see how many questions are literally in front of me collected from the past few months that have come to me through the page, through Messenger, through different places, different organizations, friends. It is insane, on top of the whole feed that has been blowing up the entire show. So I hope that for my sake, you guys understand I did the best I could. I hope that everybody still loves me at the end of this. And, it's okay if you don't, but I hope you do. I did the best I could. And I would ask everybody out there, pray for me, because, my health is not that great. And, it's just a lot of things going on. And I'm just trying to keep going and keep going and keep fighting for all of us at the same time. So you guys, please just pray for me, pray for my family. Thank you for all the love that everybody's shown over the past week or two. Definitely appreciated. And, we are working on everything. If you're listening in today and you were somebody who placed an order with our shop this past week, bear with us. You probably got a notification of shipment today, but that is a lie. You guys ended up, it just means I printed your shipping label. So don't freak out and think it's going to be there in a couple of days, because it's a lot of stuff we have to make too. And we had to order a bunch of, containers and whatnot to fill all these orders. So everybody just bear with us while we're doing that. So anyway, I hope everybody can appreciate what happened here today. And, I'll still be, I get to carry on this conversation in the future. And, I didn't hear him say yes or no that he would do the high wire, other than he said if they could give him, repeatable science and whatnot, then he would be willing to correspond, it sounded like. So I'm not really sure, how to fully see that one. But everybody, you can go back and listen to all of it. I'm telling you right now, I can't remember half of what was said because my blood pressure has been through the roof, and it's been like, how it is, guys. We're all human. Like, I could barely breathe through most of this. So if this all around my entire desk is nothing but paperwork and like a whole book, like my book that I wrote all my notes in says, "Be still and know that I am God." Like, I had to keep looking at that and reminding myself, "Ooh, it's going to be okay. You're all right. Breathe. You're doing okay." So, because I just know how everybody has such an opinion, and everybody definitely doesn't mind sharing it. So, just know that I did what I felt like I was led to do. I asked the questions I felt like I was led to ask, and honestly, the point wasn't to debate vaccines or to debunk this or approve this. The point was to have a conversation, to be a starter of conversations, and hope we could keep the door open, and to hope that we can also not if somebody gives you an in or somebody says, "Sure, I'll do this," then don't mess it up. Don't take it to a different level to make it like in your face or whatever, because it just feels like that keeps us from getting further and keeps us from being able to have future conversations. I'm grateful that I got the opportunity, because it seems like a pretty rare opportunity. Especially, I was reading to you guys earlier in the show from his book where he says that he really believes, number one, he doesn't believe in talking to somebody who doesn't have credentials to talk to. So that's already strike one for me. And then also just period, that it was a bad idea, because then you give validity to the argument. So, just super glad that I even got to do the interview, because it seems like something that is not something that happens very often. But anyway, you guys, you heard it here for Second Generation Radio Show. Lynette Marie Barron. I interviewed Paul Offit. What an interesting day. It's going to be a minute before I listen back to this one. I love you guys, and thank you for the support. And stay tuned, because I believe politics and all kinds of, like, there's this really cool show coming up with a guy named Chris. I don't even remember the whole show name, because my brain always says, Politics and Prophecies with Chris Levels. So you guys stay tuned if you want to hear that show. And don't forget, on Facebook in a few minutes, I'm going to be live with Lyra at 2:30 Central Standard Time, and that is 12:30 Pacific Standard. So you guys don't forget, I'm going to be on there talking about my interview with Offit, and so don't miss that. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for tuning in today, and we will talk to you guys next week, where I will have James Lyons-Weiler on. The week following that will be J.B. Hanley. And so don't miss those.